That meeting never happened, Mom. You're forgetting things.
No, it did. I remember every word. You know I'm telling the truth. You're here. This can't be happening. I believe it is. You said you would uphold your end.
He's lying. I was never there.
It's all on tape. He confessed. He told us everything. No, Mama, you're not remembering it correctly. I knew it. That's why I brought this.
My son looked me straight in the eye and told everyone in that lawyer's office that the meeting I remembered had never happened. "Mom, you're confused again," Nathan said gently, almost kindly. "There was no meeting where you refused to sign anything. For one terrible moment I believed him. Maybe I was forgetting things. Maybe the missing keys, the appointments, the conversations I couldn't explain really did mean something was wrong with me." Then, Patricia Monroe, the notary, sitting beside my attorney, reached into her bag and placed a small recording device on the table. "I think everyone should hear this," she said. She pressed play. A familiar voice filled the room. It wasn't mine. It was Nathan's. "Before I tell you what my son said on that recording, I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is there. And tell me in the comments if someone you loved made you question your own memory. Would you forgive them? If stories about family, betrayal, dignity, and second chances speak to you, please like this video and subscribe. It means more than you know." 6 months earlier, I still believed the hardest thing I would ever have to survive was losing my husband. George and I had been married for 43 years. When you spend that much of your life with someone, grief doesn't arrive as one enormous wave and then disappear. It hides in ordinary places, in the empty side of the bed, in the second coffee mug you reach for before remembering there is no one there to drink from it, in the television remote sitting exactly where he left it, because moving it somehow feels like admitting he isn't coming back. George died on a cold February morning after a brief illness. By summer, everyone seemed to think I was doing remarkably well. I hated that phrase, remarkably well. What it meant was that I showered, paid my bills, remembered birthdays, drove myself to the grocery store, and didn't burst into tears every time someone mentioned my husband's name. People couldn't see the nights. They couldn't see me standing in our kitchen at 11 o'clock, staring at the chair where George used to sit while I cooked. They couldn't see me touching his old navy blue jacket in the hallway closet because it still carried the faintest trace of his aftershave. Our house in Richmond, Virginia, held 40 years of memories. George and I had bought it in 1989 when Nathan was 5 and Emily hadn't been born yet. Back then it had ugly brown carpeting, a leaking porch roof, and a kitchen so small that George and I couldn't open the refrigerator and dishwasher at the same time. We loved it anyway. Over the years we renovated almost everything. George built shelves in the den himself. I planted hydrangeas along the back fence. We watched our children learn to ride bicycles on the sidewalk out front. There were birthday parties, Christmas mornings, teenage arguments, graduation photographs, and one disastrous Thanksgiving when George dropped the turkey. By the time he died, the mortgage had been paid off for almost 12 years. The house was worth around $780,000. I knew that because George had insisted we sit down with our attorney Robert Hayes every few years and review our finances. "Neither one of us gets to be helpless if the other goes first," George used to say. At the time I thought he was being morbid. After his death I understood. George had handled some of our investments, but he had never kept me ignorant. I knew where our accounts were. I knew how much money we had. I knew the passwords, insurance policies, tax records, and retirement information. Between my retirement savings, our investment account, and George's life insurance, I was secure. Not wealthy in the way people imagine wealth. I didn't own a yacht. I wasn't flying first class to Paris. But I could pay my property taxes, maintain my home, replace the roof if I needed to, and live without worrying whether groceries would fit into my monthly budget. George had given me something more valuable than luxury. He had left me stability. That was why I didn't question Nathan when he started coming around more often. My son was 42, married to Rebecca, and working as a residential real estate broker. Nathan had always been ambitious. Even as a teenager, he hated losing at anything. He could also be incredibly charming. After George died, that charm felt like a lifeline. Nathan started visiting 2 or 3 times a week. Sometimes he brought dinner. Sometimes he showed up carrying tools. Dad would haunt me if I let this place fall apart, he joked one Saturday while fixing a loose cabinet hinge. I laughed harder than the joke deserved, because hearing him mention George without lowering his voice felt good. Another weekend he replaced 2 outdoor lights. Then he checked the tires on my car. When my kitchen faucet started dripping, Nathan arrived the next morning with a new washer and fixed it before I could call a plumber. "You know you can ask me for help, right?" he said. "I know. No, Mom. I mean it. You don't have to prove anything." That touched me. One of the strangest things about widowhood is how quickly independence can begin to feel like performance. I didn't want my children worrying about me. So when Nathan offered help, I let him. I thought maybe losing his father had changed something in him too. For years, Nathan and George had loved each other, but often clashed. George believed in saving before spending. Nathan believed money existed to create opportunities. George would say, "Security first." Nathan would answer, "You can't build anything if you're afraid of risk." After George died, I hoped Nathan regretted some of those arguments. Perhaps helping me was his way of staying close to his father. That was what I told myself. The questions started casually. One afternoon, Nathan and I were sitting at the kitchen table drinking coffee when he glanced toward the backyard. "This neighborhood has gotten expensive," he said. "It certainly has." "What did that house on Brookfield sell for?" "I heard around 700,000. Nathan whistled. Then he smiled. "Yours is nicer." I shrugged. "It's home. Still no mortgage." The question barely registered. "No. Your father and I paid it off years ago." Nathan nodded. "That's amazing." He took another sip of coffee. A minute later he asked, "Is the deed just in your name now?" I looked at him. "Why?" "Just curious. Dad's name would have been removed after probate, right? I believe so." "Robert handled everything." Nathan nodded again. The conversation moved on. At least I thought it did. A week later he asked whether I had updated my will since George died. Then he wanted to know whether Emily knew where my investment records were. I laughed. "Why are you suddenly so interested in my paperwork?" Nathan smiled. "Because somebody has to be. I've managed paperwork longer than you've been alive. I know that." He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm not saying you can't handle it." But something about his answer stayed with me. A few days later, Rebecca came with him for dinner. Rebecca was 39, stylish without being showy, and worked as an interior designer. She had always been pleasant with me, although we had never been especially close. That evening, Nathan walked through the house differently. I noticed it because I had spent 30 years managing an insurance office. My job had trained me to notice when people were looking for something. Nathan wasn't admiring family photographs. He was evaluating. He glanced at the hardwood floors, the renovated kitchen, the windows. Then he stood at the back door studying the yard. "You've got a bigger lot than most houses around here," he said. "Your father liked having space. This property alone must have appreciated like crazy." Rebecca looked at him. "Nathan, what your mother doesn't want to spend dinner talking about real estate, occupational hazard." He laughed. So did I. But later that night after they left, I stood in the kitchen thinking about it. The deed, the mortgage, the will, the investments, the value of the house. Any one question would have meant nothing. Together they felt different. Then I immediately felt ashamed. Nathan was my son. He had just lost his father. Maybe asking about money was how he dealt with fear. Maybe he wanted reassurance that I would be okay. I had spent 42 years being his mother. I remembered holding him through chickenpox, sitting beside his hospital bed, when he broke his arm at 11, helping him with college applications, and lending him money for his first apartment. Surely I wasn't going to turn a few practical questions into something ugly. So I said nothing. Nathan continued helping. He changed the filter in my furnace. He arranged for someone to trim a tree. He even created a folder on my computer labeled House Documents. Everything should be organized, he told me. I agreed. Organization had always made me feel safe. One Sunday afternoon, I found him alone in George's old study. A drawer of the filing cabinet was open. Nathan turned when he heard me. Looking for something your homeowner's insurance. Why? I wanted to check whether your coverage reflects the current property value. I leaned against the doorway. Did I ask you to do that? For a fraction of a second, something changed in his face. Then the familiar smile returned. No, I was trying to save you a headache. I should have asked him to close the drawer. I should have told him that being my son did not give him permission to search through my files. Instead, I felt guilty for sounding ungrateful. It's probably in the blue folder, I said. Nathan found it. He glanced through the paperwork, then returned everything neatly. Before leaving that evening, he stood in the foyer and looked around the house. The late afternoon sunlight was coming through the windows, touching the staircase George had refinished with his own hands. Nathan's expression softened. For a moment, I saw the little boy who used to slide down that banister despite being told 100 times not to. Then he looked at me. You know, Mom, this is a lot for one person. I've been managing. I know. He stepped closer and kissed my forehead. But you shouldn't have to manage all of this alone. After he left, I locked the door and stood there with my hand resting on the deadbolt. At the time, I heard concern in his words. A son worried about his widowed mother. Months later, I would remember that moment differently. Because Nathan hadn't asked whether I was lonely. He hadn't asked whether I was sleeping. He hadn't asked whether I still cried for his father when nobody was around. He had asked about the mortgage, the deed, the will, the investment account, and the value of my home. I just hadn't understood yet that my son wasn't only checking on me. He was beginning to calculate what I had. The first time Nathan mentioned a power of attorney, he made it sound like the kind of responsible decision every sensible widow eventually made. It was a Tuesday afternoon, about 3 weeks after I found him going through the filing cabinet in George's study. Nathan had brought lunch from a little deli George used to love. Turkey on rye for me, roast beef for himself, and 2 cups of coffee. For nearly an hour, nothing about the visit felt unusual. We talked about Emily's hospital schedule in Raleigh. Rebecca had taken on a new design client. Nathan complained about a contractor who kept missing deadlines. Then while I was clearing the plates, he said, Mom, have you ever thought about setting up a limited power of attorney? I turned around. For what, just emergencies? He said it casually. Too casually, I would later realize. Nathan leaned back in his chair. Say you fall and end up in the hospital for a week. Somebody might need to deal with insurance, pay a bill, talk to the bank, handle something with the house. It's better to arrange that before you need it. I already have estate documents. I know. But those aren't always the same thing. That much was true. George and I had signed wills, medical directives, and other documents with Robert Hayes years earlier. After George died, Robert had helped me update several things. But I couldn't remember exactly what authority anyone had if I became temporarily unable to handle my affairs. Nathan saw me thinking. That's all I mean, he said. Nothing dramatic. He reached into the leather portfolio beside his chair. I actually printed something. That surprised me. You brought paperwork, just a draft. He slid several pages across the table. The first page had my name printed near the top. Elaine Owens. Below it was Nathan's. I picked up the document. There were sections about banking, real property insurance, financial transactions, and something called delegated authority. The language was dense. Not impossible to understand, but dense enough that I knew better than to pretend. For more than 30 years, I had worked as an office administrator for an insurance company. I had spent half my career watching people sign things they hadn't read because somebody standing beside them said, "It's standard." Standard had never been a word I trusted. I turned to the second page. What exactly would this let you do? Nathan smiled. Basically what I just said. That isn't what I asked. His smile faded slightly. It would let me help if you couldn't handle something yourself, with my bank accounts if necessary, with the house only administrative things. What kind of administrative things? Nathan sighed. Not loudly. Just enough for me to notice. Mom, it's a standard limited POA. Then Robert can look at it. The change in Nathan was immediate, not dramatic. He didn't slam his hand on the table. He didn't raise his voice. But his shoulders stiffened. Robert Hayes. Yes. Why, I stared at him. Because he's my attorney. I know, but this doesn't need to become some $500 legal consultation. I'm not worried about the fee. Nathan leaned forward. Robert is old school. He'll turn a simple document into an estate planning project. He's been our lawyer for 27 years. Exactly. I frowned. What does that mean? It means Dad trusted him with everything, so you automatically trust him with everything too. There was something dismissive in the way he said it. I put the pages down. Your father trusted Robert because Robert earned it. Nathan rubbed his forehead. I'm not attacking him. It sounds like you are. I'm saying this is simple. Then there shouldn't be a problem with him reading it. For a few seconds neither of us spoke. Then Nathan smiled again. All right. But the warmth had disappeared from it. Sure. Have Robert look at it. I reached for the papers. Nathan placed his hand on them first. Actually, let me clean up a couple things before you send him this version. What things? Formatting. Some language. I looked down at his hand. You said it was standard. It is. Then why does it need cleaning up? Nathan laughed. You really did work in insurance too long. That job paid for a good portion of the life you grew up in. I know, Mom. He lifted his hand as if surrendering. I'll email you a clean copy tonight. Then he put the document back into his portfolio. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. The email never came. 2 days later, I checked my inbox. Nothing. I checked spam. Nothing. The following Sunday, Nathan called. We talked for 10 minutes before I mentioned it. You never sent that power of attorney document. There was a pause. What document? The one you brought Tuesday. Oh. Another pause. I thought I left you a copy. No. Are you sure? Yes. I could have sworn I did. You took it with you. Nathan chuckled. We'll check the folder on your desk. I was standing in the kitchen, so I carried the phone into George's study. The room still felt like his. His desk, his old brass lamp, his framed photograph of Nathan and Emily at the beach when they were children. I checked the folder. No. What about the drawer? I opened it. Nothing. You probably put it somewhere safe. I didn't. Okay, Mom. The way he said it irritated me. Not angry. Patient. Like I was becoming difficult. Nathan. I remember you putting it back in your portfolio. Maybe. Not maybe. You did. Then I'll send another copy. I waited. Again, nothing arrived. A week later, he came by to replace a loose board on the back steps. I brought it up a third time, the POA. Nathan looked confused. What about it? You still haven't sent it. I did. No, you didn't. Yes, I did. When last week? To what email address? Your regular one. I never received it. Nathan stared at me for a moment. Then he softened his voice. Mom, are you sure? There it was. Not an accusation. Not yet. Just a question. I folded my arms. I check my email every morning. I'm not saying you don't. Then what are you saying? He wiped his hands on a rag. Nothing. Maybe it went to spam. I checked. Maybe you deleted it accidentally. I didn't. Nathan gave me a small smile. You've got a lot going on. What does that mean? Dad's only been gone a few months. Grief does strange things to concentration. The sentence landed harder than it should have. Because grief had affected me. There had been mornings when I walked upstairs and forgot why. Once I put the milk in the pantry and found it 10 minutes later. I had forgotten the name of a neighbor I had known for years. Were those normal mistakes? I thought they were. But when your child looks at you with concern, ordinary mistakes suddenly feel like symptoms. I'm fine, I said. I know. Nathan stepped closer. I'm not saying there's something wrong with you. He kissed my cheek. I worry, that's all. After he left, I checked my email again. Inbox, spam, trash. I searched Nathan, then power of attorney, then POA. Nothing. I sat in George's desk chair and stared at the screen. I knew Nathan hadn't sent it. At least I thought I knew. That distinction bothered me. I opened the desk drawer and found a yellow legal pad. At the top I wrote, Nathan says he emailed POA. I did not receive it. Then I stopped. The sentence looked ridiculous. Why was I documenting an argument with my own son? I tore the page off, crumpled it, and threw it away. 2 days later, Emily called from Raleigh. We talked about work, her neighbor's new puppy, and a restaurant she wanted to take me to when I visited. Then she said, Nathan told me you're getting your paperwork organized. I went still. What paperwork? Your estate stuff, I guess. What exactly did he say? I don't know. Just that he's helping you simplify things. I never asked him to. Emily was quiet. I'm sure he's just trying to help. That's what he keeps saying. She laughed lightly. Well, you know Nathan. He likes to take over. Normally I would have laughed too. I didn't. That evening I called Robert's office. His assistant answered. Hayes Law, this is Melissa. Hello, Melissa. It's Elaine Owens. Mrs. Owens. How are you? I'm doing all right. Is Robert available? He's with a client. Can I have him call you? I hesitated. Yes. Tell him I have a question about a power of attorney. There was a brief silence. Of course. And Melissa? Yes. Has Nathan contacted Robert about me recently? Her tone became more careful. I'd need to let Mr. Hayes answer that. My stomach tightened. Why, I'm sorry, Mrs. Owens. I really should let him speak with you. When Robert called an hour later, I almost didn't ask. Almost. Robert, has Nathan contacted you? Yes. I gripped the phone. When? About 2 weeks ago. What did he want? He asked some general questions about your estate documents. I felt something cold move through me. Did you tell him anything? No. I told him you're my client. I closed my eyes. What kind of questions? Robert paused. He wanted to know whether you currently had a financial power of attorney, and whether anyone had authority regarding your real property. The house. Again. Did he say why he said he was helping you organize things after George's death? I looked toward the empty chair across the kitchen. That's what he says to everyone. Robert's voice changed. Elaine, is something wrong? I wanted to tell him everything. The document. Nathan taking it back. The missing email. The questions about my deed. But saying it aloud would make my suspicions real. He brought me a limited power of attorney, I finally said. Did you sign it? No. Good. The speed of his answer frightened me. Why did you say it like that? Because I haven't reviewed it. He said it was standard. There is no document affecting your financial authority that I want you signing because someone calls it standard. I swallowed. That's what I thought. Send it to me. I don't have it. Why not? Nathan took it. Robert was silent. Elaine, if he brings it back, don't sign it. Call me first. I will. And keep copies of anything he gives you. After we hung up, I stayed at the kitchen table for a long time. For the first time since George died, the house didn't feel lonely. It felt exposed. The next afternoon, Nathan appeared without calling. He was carrying groceries. You didn't need to do that, I said. I was nearby. He placed the bags on the counter and started putting things away, as though the previous conversations had never happened. I watched him. Finally, I said I spoke to Robert. His hand stopped inside the refrigerator. Only for a second. Then he continued. About what? The power of attorney. Nathan closed the refrigerator. Okay. He wants to review it. Of course he does. And he said you called him. Nathan's expression barely changed. I asked a couple questions. About my financial authority. I was trying to understand what was already in place. Why didn't you ask me? I did. No. You asked whether my will was updated. You asked about the deed. You asked about my investments. Nathan exhaled. Mom, listen to yourself. The words stung. What is that supposed to mean? You're turning normal conversations into something suspicious. Then give me the document. I told you I sent it. You did not. Nathan looked at me for several seconds. Then his face softened. That expression would eventually become familiar to me. Concern mixed with patience. Mom, he said quietly, maybe you printed it and put it somewhere. I didn't. Maybe you forgot. The kitchen seemed to become very still. There was no accusation in his voice. That was what made it powerful. Just a son gently offering his widowed mother an explanation. Maybe you forgot. I stared at him. For the first time, instead of asking myself why Nathan was so interested in my finances, I asked a different question. What if he was right? What if I had forgotten? Nathan reached across the counter and touched my hand. It's okay, he said. You don't have to remember everything. I pulled my hand away. I remember enough. He smiled sadly. Of course you do. But after he left, I searched George's study again. Every folder, every drawer, every stack of mail. I even checked the trash. There was no power of attorney document. There was no email. There was no evidence Nathan had ever given me either one. And for reasons I couldn't yet explain, I found myself standing alone in the middle of that room, wondering whether the missing paperwork was the problem, or whether my son had just planted the first small seed of a much more frightening idea, that my own memory could no longer be trusted. The first thing that disappeared was my car key. That sounds almost laughably small now. People misplace keys every day. George used to spend 10 minutes searching for his glasses while they were sitting on top of his head. Once I found the television remote in the refrigerator after Nathan's children had visited. Ordinary people forget ordinary things. But when someone has already suggested that your memory may be slipping, a missing key stops being an inconvenience. It becomes evidence. I had kept my keys in the same place for 21 years, a small blue ceramic bowl on the table beside the front door. George bought that bowl during a weekend trip to Williamsburg. It was ugly if I'm being truthful, with uneven white flowers painted around the edge. But it was ours. Keys went in the bowl, always. One Thursday morning, I came downstairs dressed for a dental appointment and reached into it. Empty. I checked my purse, the kitchen counter, my coat pockets. Then I checked the blue bowl again, as though the keys might appear if I looked hard enough. Nothing. I was already running late when my phone rang. Nathan. Morning, Mom. I can't talk. I'm looking for my car keys. There was a short pause. Again, I stopped moving. What do you mean again? You couldn't find them last week either. No, I couldn't find my reading glasses last week. Are you sure? Yes. All right. Don't get upset. I'm not upset. But I was. I searched the kitchen, then George's study, then upstairs. Finally, I found the keys inside the drawer of the small table beside the front door. Not in the bowl. In the drawer underneath it. I stared at them. I never put them there. At least I didn't think I did. I called the dentist and apologized for being late. When I told Nathan later that afternoon where I had found them, he laughed gently. See, mystery solved. I don't put my keys in that drawer. You must have this time. I wouldn't. Mom. There was that tone again. Soft. Patient. Everybody misplaces things. I know everybody misplaces things. Then don't scare yourself. I hadn't told him I was scared. That bothered me almost as much as the keys. 2 days later, I found an electric bill on my kitchen table stamped past due. I felt my stomach drop. I had paid it. I remembered sitting at George's desk on the first Monday of the month, opening the utility website, entering the amount, and writing the confirmation number on my monthly expense sheet. At least I thought I remembered. I immediately logged into my bank account. The payment was there. Processed 12 days earlier. I looked at the paper bill again. Then I noticed the statement date. It had been mailed before my payment posted. There was nothing unusual about it. Still, I couldn't remember putting the envelope on the kitchen table. That evening, Nathan stopped by. His eyes landed on the bill. Everything okay? It's paid. He picked it up. It says past due. I paid it before this statement arrived. Nathan looked at me. You sure? I felt heat rise in my face. Yes. He opened his mouth. Don't. Don't what? Ask me if I forgot. Nathan raised both hands. I wasn't going to. But his expression said something else. Concern. That was what made it so difficult. If he had laughed at me, I would have become angry. If he had called me incompetent, I would have thrown him out. Instead, my son looked worried. And worry is much harder to defend yourself against. The third incident happened the following week. I opened my phone calendar and saw an appointment scheduled for Friday at 10:30. Financial consultation, Nathan. I stared at it. I had no memory of creating it. I called him. What financial consultation? What the appointment Friday? Oh, that. What is it? We talked about it. My fingers tightened around the phone. When Sunday? You weren't here Sunday. I called. No, you didn't. Mom, yes, I did. I walked into George's study and opened my notebook. After the argument about the power of attorney, I had bought a black spiral notebook from the pharmacy. I hadn't told anyone about it. At first I felt foolish, but I had started recording things. Tuesday grocery store called Emily 7:15. Wednesday plumber estimate. Thursday dentist 10 keys missing. Friday electric bill confirmed paid. Saturday Rebecca called about dinner. Sunday church lunch with Susan Miller home, 3:40. No Nathan. I wrote down my calls Sunday, I said. Nathan laughed softly. You're keeping a log now. Yes. Why? Because apparently, everybody thinks I forget things. Nobody thinks that. You do. I said grief can affect concentration. And now there's an appointment in my calendar I didn't make. You did make it. No. Mom, maybe you forgot to write it in your notebook. That sentence silenced me. Because he was right about one thing. The notebook only worked if I remembered to write everything down. What if I hadn't? I canceled the appointment. Nathan sounded annoyed but didn't argue. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with the notebook open in front of me. I added a new rule. Write everything immediately. For the next 2 weeks I did. Phone calls, visitors, appointments, bills, even where I left my keys. It gave me a sense of control I hadn't realized I was losing. Then something happened that the notebook couldn't explain away. I came home one afternoon after meeting my friend Susan for lunch. The moment I stepped inside, I knew someone had been there. Nothing obvious was missing. But George's study door was open. I always kept it closed. I walked down the hallway slowly. One drawer of the filing cabinet was partially open. I stood there staring at it. My first thought was burglary. Then I noticed a coffee mug in the kitchen sink. I hadn't used it. My hands began trembling. I called Nathan. He answered on the second ring. Hey, Mom. Were you in my house? Silence. Then earlier. Yes. Yeah. Why? The casualness stunned me. You came into my house while I wasn't here. I needed to grab something. What a copy of Dad's old property assessment. Why I told you I was comparing some numbers. No, you didn't. Another pause. Mom, you gave me permission to come in. I did not. Yes, you did. When last week. I opened the notebook. What day I don't remember exactly. You remember me giving permission, but you don't remember when his voice hardened slightly. Why are you interrogating me because you entered my house without telling me? You gave me the spare key, for emergencies, and you said I could use it if I needed something. No. Yes, you did. I flipped through every page. There was no conversation about the key. No permission. Nothing. I wrote everything down, I said. Elaine. He rarely called me by my first name. It made me feel less like his mother and more like someone he was trying to manage. You don't write down every sentence you say. I would remember giving you permission to enter my house. Would you? The words were quiet, but they struck me like a slap. I didn't answer. Nathan immediately softened. I'm sorry. That came out wrong. No, it didn't. Mom. I wasn't trying to upset you. What were you looking for, I told you? Property assessment. Yes. Why for comparison? With what a client property? Why would my house be relevant to a client? He sighed. This is exactly what I mean. What do you mean you're turning something simple into something sinister? I came home and found my files open. I didn't take anything. That isn't the point. Nathan was quiet. Then he said, maybe I should give the key back. Yes. That answer seemed to surprise him. All right, today. I'll bring it tomorrow. No, today. He arrived 40 minutes later. I waited at the door. Nathan held the brass key between 2 fingers. Here. I took it. He looked past me toward the hallway. You really think I would steal from you? I didn't say that. You didn't have to. You entered my house without permission. I thought I had permission. You didn't. Nathan stared at me. Then his expression changed again. That same mixture of sadness and concern. Mom, you might want to talk to your doctor. My throat tightened. About what? Nothing serious. Say it. You've been forgetting conversations. I have not. You've misplaced things. You got confused about the POA. You forgot the conversation about the house. I didn't forget it. You don't know that. I do know. Nathan glanced toward the notebook on the hallway table. That notebook isn't your memory. No. I picked it up. But right now, I trust it more than I trust you. The hurt on his face looked genuine. For a moment, I nearly apologized. Then I remembered the open filing cabinet. I didn't. Nathan left without another word. That night, I locked every door twice. Then I sat at George's desk and read my notebook from the beginning. The entries were clear. Dates, times, calls, receipts, confirmation numbers. Nothing about giving Nathan permission. Nothing about receiving the power of attorney document. Nothing about agreeing to a financial consultation. I should have felt reassured. Instead, I felt terrified. Because Nathan had planted a question I couldn't completely silence. What if the notebook wasn't proof? What if I only wrote down the things I remembered? What if there were conversations missing between the lines? I closed it and looked at George's photograph. "What would you tell me?" I whispered. Of course, the photograph couldn't answer. 3 days later, Rebecca called. We talked pleasantly for several minutes. Then just before hanging up, she said, "Elaine, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Are you sleeping okay?" The question seemed harmless. "I suppose. Nathan says you've been under a lot of stress." My stomach tightened. "Did he?" "He's worried." "About what?" Rebecca hesitated. "He said you've been forgetting little things." There it was. The private concern had escaped my house. It was becoming a family story. "I am not losing my memory, Rebecca." "I didn't say you were." "Then don't talk about me as if I am." She apologized immediately. But after we hung up, I realized something had changed. Before, every strange incident existed only between Nathan and me. Now he was telling other people. And once enough people hear the same story about you, something frightening happens. They stop asking whether the story is true. They start watching you for evidence that it is. I opened my notebook. At the bottom of that day's page, I wrote one sentence. "Nathan is telling Rebecca I am becoming forgetful." I underlined it twice. For the first time, the notebook wasn't there to help me remember. It was there because I was beginning to understand that someday I might need to prove I had never forgotten at all. The first thing I noticed when Emily came home from Raleigh was the way she watched me make coffee. My daughter had always been observant. She was a registered nurse, and after more than a decade working 12-hour hospital shifts, she could probably tell when someone was uncomfortable before they admitted it to themselves. But this was different. I reached into the cabinet for 2 mugs. Emily watched. I poured the coffee. She watched. I opened the refrigerator, took out the cream, and put it back when I was finished. Still watching. Finally, I turned around. "Emily, if you keep staring at me like that, I'm going to start charging admission." Her face reddened. "I wasn't staring. You've been watching me since you got here. I've missed you. You've missed the way I make coffee." That earned a small laugh. But she looked away too quickly. Emily had driven from Raleigh on Friday afternoon and planned to stay through Sunday. I had been looking forward to the visit for weeks. Since George died, I treasured having either of my children in the house. Usually. We spent Friday evening talking about her work, a new supervisor she disliked, and a nurse on her floor who was expecting her first baby. For a few hours, everything felt normal. Then, Saturday morning, Emily asked Mom, "Are you remembering your medications?" I looked at her. "What medications? Your blood pressure pills. I take 1 pill every morning." "I know. Then why are you asking?" She stirred her coffee. "No reason." Emily. Her shoulders dropped. "Nathan mentioned you might have missed a dose." I almost laughed. "Nathan has never seen me take my medication. He said you told him." "I didn't." Emily looked uncomfortable. Maybe he misunderstood. Maybe. I hated the suspicion in my own voice. I also hated what happened next. Instead of asking why Nathan would say something untrue, Emily asked, "Have you had any trouble driving?" "No." "Getting turned around?" "Number, finding familiar places?" I set my mug down. "What exactly has your brother told you?" "Mom, don't get upset. I am getting very tired of people saying that before they tell me something upsetting." Emily sighed. "He's worried about you, so everyone keeps telling me. He said you've been repeating yourself, when I don't know. He said you've missed appointments." One appointment appeared in my calendar that I never made. And the keys. I stared at her. He told you about my keys. Emily immediately realized she'd said too much. Mom, I misplaced my car keys once. Nathan said it happened more than once. He's wrong. He also said you've been getting suspicious about money. That one hurt. What does that mean? He said you accused him of going through your financial papers. He was going through my financial papers. He said you gave him permission. I did not. Emily fell silent. I stood and walked into George's study. The black notebook was in the desk drawer. I brought it back and placed it in front of her. What is this? She asked. My memory, apparently. I opened to the entries about Nathan entering my house. I started writing things down. Emily read quietly. I could see the nurse in her taking over. Dates mattered to Emily. Details mattered. Documentation mattered. But when she looked up, there was still doubt in her eyes. Mom, keeping notes is good. But I didn't say but. You were about to. She took my hand. I just think maybe we should rule things out. The words made me feel suddenly old. Not 67. 987. What things? Vitamin deficiencies, thyroid issues, medication effects, stress, depression. There are lots of things that can affect concentration. And dementia. Emily's eyes softened. I didn't say that. But that's what we're talking about. We're talking about making sure you're okay. I pulled my hand away. Did Nathan ask you to do this? No. Did he ask you to talk to me? Emily hesitated. That was answer enough. I stood. I'm going for a walk. Mom, I need air. Outside Richmond was bright and warm. A woman across the street was planting flowers. 2 children rode bicycles past me. Everything looked exactly the same as it had the day before. But I felt as though something fundamental had shifted. My children were discussing my mind. Not my grief, not my loneliness. My mind. And they were doing it without me. I walked for nearly an hour. By the time I returned, I had made a decision. I'll get checked. Emily looked relieved. Really? Yes, thank you. I'm not doing it because Nathan thinks I'm confused. I know. I'm doing it because I want this conversation to end. Emily nodded. I called my primary care physician Monday morning. Dr. Karen Mitchell had been my doctor for 11 years. She knew George. She knew how difficult the months after his death had been. When I explained why I wanted an appointment, she didn't laugh or dismiss me. She also didn't panic. She asked questions about sleep, appetite, stress medications, alcohol, daily functioning, driving, finances, and whether I had experienced significant confusion. Then she performed a brief cognitive screening. I remember sitting in that examination room, feeling as though every answer carried the weight of my independence. What day is it? Where are we? Remember these words. Draw this clock. Count backward. Repeat the words. I did everything she asked. Afterward, Dr. Mitchell folded her hands. Elaine, I'm not seeing anything today that alarms me. The relief was so powerful I almost cried. So I'm fine. You're functioning well. Your screening is reassuring. She reminded me that a brief screening wasn't a guarantee about the future. I understood. But there was no evidence that I was incapable of managing my life. Dr. Mitchell also said something I desperately needed to hear. Grief affects attention. Stress affects memory. Normal aging affects recall. Forgetting where you put your keys is not automatically a disease. I laughed. You have no idea how much I needed someone to say that. She smiled. I suspect I do. Before leaving, I asked for a copy of the visit summary. Old habits. Documentation. I placed it inside my notebook. That evening I called Emily. Everything looked normal. I could hear the relief in her voice. That's wonderful. I told you. I know. Then she apologized. I hope I didn't make you feel like I didn't trust you. You did. Silence. But I know you were worried. I was. I forgive worried. She laughed softly. I love you. I love you too. For the first time in weeks, I slept well. Then Nathan came over. He arrived Wednesday evening with Rebecca. I hadn't told him the results directly, so Emily must have. Nathan hugged me. Good news. Yes, I knew you'd be okay. Something about that irritated me. You were the one telling everyone I wasn't. I never said that. You told Emily I was repeating myself. I said I'd noticed a few things. You told Rebecca too. Rebecca looked down. Nathan sighed. Mom, can we not turn this into a fight? There doesn't need to be a fight. Dr. Mitchell found nothing concerning. Great. Then stop talking about my memory. Nathan nodded. Absolutely. For a moment I thought that was the end. Then Rebecca went to the bathroom. Nathan lowered his voice. You know those tests aren't perfect. I stared at him. What nothing? No. Say it. He hesitated. You probably had a good day. The words were quiet, almost gentle, but they cut through every bit of relief I had felt. A good day. Cognitive issues can fluctuate. You're a real estate broker. I can read. So can I. Mom, I'm not diagnosing you. Then stop acting like you know more than my doctor. Nathan leaned back. I'm just saying one test doesn't erase what we've seen. What have you seen? The keys? One time. The appointment. I didn't make it. The paperwork you couldn't find. You never sent it. You forgot letting me use the spare key. I did not. Nathan's face changed. Not angry. Wounded. Do you hear yourself? I felt something inside me go cold. Yes, I said. I hear myself perfectly. Rebecca returned before he could answer. The subject changed. But I watched Nathan for the rest of the evening. And something became clear. If he had truly been worried about dementia, good medical news should have relieved him. Instead, he had immediately found a reason to dismiss it. At the next afternoon, Emily called. Her voice sounded strange. Mom, can I ask you something? Of course. Did Nathan talk to you about your appointment? Yes. What did he say? I hesitated. That I probably had a good day. Emily was silent. He said the same thing to me. My hand tightened around the phone. When after I told him your screening was normal. And what did you say? I told him we should be relieved. What did he say? Another pause. He said we shouldn't let one good result make us ignore a pattern. Pattern. There it was again. Not isolated incidents, a pattern. Emily. What pattern? I don't know anymore. That answer surprised me. What do you mean? I've been thinking about the examples he gave me, and most of them came from him. I sat down. Emily continued. I haven't personally seen you forget anything serious. A knot inside my chest loosened slightly. Thank you. But Nathan sounds so certain. I know, that was the problem. Nathan didn't shout. He didn't make wild accusations. He spoke quietly, reasonably. He sounded like a concerned son trying to protect his mother. And each time I defended myself, I sounded more emotional, more defensive, more suspicious. Exactly the way a confused person might sound. After we hung up, I opened my notebook. I added the doctor's appointment. Screening reassuring. No concerning findings today. Then underneath it, Nathan says I probably had a good day. I stared at those words for a long time. For weeks I had been asking myself whether I was forgetting things. That evening, for the first time, I asked a different question. What if Nathan didn't believe I was losing my memory at all? What if he needed other people to believe it? The thought frightened me enough that I almost crossed it out. Because believing your son is worried about you is painful. Believing your son may be deliberately making people question your mind is something else entirely. I closed the notebook. On the desk beside it was the medical summary, proving that at least on that day, a doctor had found nothing alarming. Nathan had been given exactly the reassurance a loving son should have wanted, and he had rejected it. That was when my fear began to change. I was becoming less afraid of what might be happening inside my mind, and much more afraid of what my son might be planning outside of it. The call from the title company came on a Monday morning while I was watering the hydrangeas George and I had planted nearly 20 years earlier. I almost let it go to voicemail. The number wasn't familiar, and after months of insurance calls, estate paperwork, and people trying to sell me everything from burial plans to replacement windows, I had become suspicious of unknown numbers. But something made me answer. Hello, may I speak with Elaine Owens? This is Elaine. My name is Melissa Grant. I'm calling from Commonwealth Title Services regarding an inquiry connected to your property on Hawthorne Ridge Drive. I stopped watering. My property. Yes, ma'am. I just need to verify a few details related to preliminary documentation. What documentation? There was a pause. Are you currently working with someone regarding a transfer of authority or estate planning arrangement? No. Another pause. This one longer. Perhaps I should let you speak with the person who initiated the inquiry. Who initiated it? I have Nathan Owens listed as the contact. My grip tightened around the phone. My son, yes, ma'am. The garden hose slipped from my other hand and fell onto the grass. Water sprayed across my shoes. What exactly did Nathan ask you? I don't want to give you incomplete information. It appears to have been a preliminary inquiry involving title status and possible authority related to the property. Possible authority for whom I believe that's something you should discuss with Mr. Owens or your attorney. My heart started beating harder. Is anyone trying to sell my house? No, ma'am. I don't see a sale transaction. Is anyone trying to borrow against it? Another careful pause. There is no completed financing transaction in our file. That wasn't the same as no. I knew enough from 30 years in an insurance office to recognize language designed to answer without answering. Thank you, I said. After hanging up, I turned off the hose and went inside. My black notebook was in George's study. I wrote down the time, the caller's name, the company, and every detail I could remember. Then I called Nathan. He answered cheerfully. Hey, Mom. I just got a call from Commonwealth Title Services. Silence. Only a second. But I noticed. Oh, right. What do you mean, right? I was going to explain that. Then explain it now. Nathan sighed. I've been looking into whether putting the house into a family trust would simplify things. What things? Probate, estate administration, future taxes. The same things we've been talking about. We haven't been talking about putting my house into a trust. We talked about simplifying your estate. You talked about it. Mom, no, don't mom me. Why is a title company calling about my property? Because title status is part of the process. What process? Planning. The word irritated me. Planning could mean almost anything. I already have an attorney for planning. I know. Then why didn't you speak with Robert? Nathan's voice tightened. Because I'm trying to gather information before we pay Robert to tell us things I can find out myself. You know what I mean. No, Nathan. Lately I don't. He was quiet. Then his voice softened. Okay. You're right. I should have explained it first. That apology surprised me. I don't want you contacting companies about my house without telling me. Fair. And I am not signing a trust document I haven't reviewed with Robert. I'm not asking you to. I almost laughed. You asked me to sign a power of attorney, and you wanted more explanation. I heard you. He paused. That's why I arranged for us to sit down with a notary. A notary, Patricia Monroe. She handles a lot of real estate documents. She can walk us through the signature requirements. I don't need someone to walk me through how to sign my name. That's not what I meant. What exactly would I be signing? Preliminary documents. My stomach tightened. What preliminary documents? Mom, instead of arguing over the phone, why don't you come with me Thursday? Bring your questions. If you're uncomfortable, you don't sign. That last sentence mattered. If you're uncomfortable, you don't sign. All right, I said. Thursday morning, I put my notebook in my purse before leaving the house. Nathan picked me up at 10. He was unusually pleasant during the drive. He talked about Rebecca's latest project and asked whether I wanted to have lunch afterward. For a few minutes, I wondered whether I had allowed suspicion to make everything darker than it was. Then we arrived at Patricia Monroe's office. Patricia was 59 with silver threaded through her dark hair and reading glasses hanging from a thin chain around her neck. Her office was small and orderly. Certificates hung on one wall. A printer sat behind her desk. 2 chairs faced her. Mrs. Owens. Yes, I'm Patricia Monroe. She shook my hand, then Nathan's. Before we sat, she asked for identification. I handed her my driver's license. She compared the photograph carefully. Then she looked at me. Mrs. Owens, before we begin, I want to be clear about my role. I can verify identity, willingness, and the execution of documents within my authority. I am not your attorney, and I cannot give you legal advice. I understand. If you don't understand the document or don't wish to sign, we stop. Nathan shifted beside me. Of course. Patricia looked directly at him. I need Mrs. Owens to answer for herself. Something about that made me feel safer. Patricia explained that her office retained a verification record for certain appointments involving significant property authority. Before the substantive discussion began, she obtained our acknowledgement that the verification portion would be recorded and retained with the office file. Nathan agreed. So did I. At the time, I barely thought about it. Patricia placed several pages in front of me. I recognized some language from the power of attorney document Nathan had shown me. But this version was longer. I read the first page, then the second. Nathan shifted again. Take your time, Patricia said. I intend to. On page 3, I found a paragraph that made me stop. It referred to authority concerning real property liens, borrowing, refinancing, and instruments affecting title. I read it twice, then a third time. Nathan. Yes, you said this was about a family trust. It is. Then why does this talk about borrowing? He leaned closer. That's standard language. I looked at Patricia. Is it? She chose her words carefully. The document appears to grant certain authority involving real property. That authority may include executing instruments connected to financing. Nathan interrupted. But only if necessary. Patricia raised one hand. Mr. Owens, please let your mother ask her questions. He leaned back. I looked down again. My heartbeat had become uncomfortably loud. Does this mean Nathan could borrow against my house? Patricia didn't rush. It may provide authority that could be used in connection with financing, depending on the document and circumstances. If you need a legal interpretation of its scope, you should have your attorney review it. I turned to Nathan. You told me this was about avoiding probate. It is. That isn't what I asked. He exhaled. Mom, nobody is taking out a loan. Then why do you need authority to do it? Because legal documents cover possibilities. Possibilities for whom Nathan's jaw tightened. For you. For me. If something happened and the house needed repairs or taxes had to be handled, or there was some emergency, I have money for repairs. That's not the point. Then what is the point? Patricia spoke. Mrs. Owens, do you understand the authority this document would grant? I looked at the pages, then at Nathan, then back at Patricia. No. Nathan moved in his chair. Mom, we already went through this. I turned toward him. No, we didn't. Yes, we did. When at your house, you told me it was a limited power of attorney for emergencies. It is limited. To what Nathan looked toward Patricia. This is getting unnecessarily complicated. Patricia remained calm. It isn't complicated from my perspective. Mrs. Owens has said she does not fully understand the document. Nathan rubbed his forehead. She understands the purpose. Patricia looked at me. Mrs. Owens, are you comfortable signing this today? I heard George's voice in my memory. Read before you sign. Never let embarrassment cost you something important. No, I said. Nathan turned sharply. Mom. No. Patricia nodded. Then we stop. Nathan stared at her. Could we at least finish the verification? The verification is complete enough for my record. You're refusing to notarize. I will not notarize Mrs. Owens' signature on a document she has told me she does not fully understand and does not wish to sign. My hands were trembling. But underneath the embarrassment was something else. Relief. Patricia gathered the pages. Nathan reached for them. She placed her hand on top. I'll make a notation that no notarization occurred. Nathan's expression changed. Why? Because an appointment occurred and no execution was completed. I don't see why that needs to be documented. Patricia looked at him calmly. Because that's my procedure. The room went silent. I picked up my purse. Nathan stood. Fine. His voice was controlled, but I knew my son well enough to hear the anger underneath. As we walked toward the door, Patricia called my name. Mrs. Owens, I turned. If you decide to revisit any document involving your home, have your own attorney review it first. Nathan heard her. So did I. I will, I said. The drive home was nothing like the drive there. Nathan didn't mention lunch. He barely spoke. Halfway to my house, he finally said, "You made that much harder than it needed to be." I looked out the window. I asked questions. "You embarrassed me. That wasn't my intention. She treated me like I was trying to trick you." I turned toward him. Were you? His hands tightened around the steering wheel. Unbelievable. What is unbelievable is discovering borrowing authority inside paperwork you described as estate planning. You misunderstood it. Then Robert can explain it. Nathan laughed once without humor. Of course. Robert. When we reached my house, I got out without waiting for him to open the door. Inside, I went straight to George's study. I opened the black notebook. Thursday, 10:00 a.m. Meeting with Patricia Monroe. Nathan present. Then I wrote, document included authority involving property financing. I asked if Nathan could borrow against my house. Patricia said authority could involve financing and recommended attorney review. I said I did not understand fully. I said no. Patricia refused to notarize. I underlined the final sentence, twice. At that moment, I believed the notebook was the strongest protection I had. I didn't know Patricia had something stronger, a record stored in her own office, a record containing my voice, and Nathan's. That recording would matter later for a reason I could not yet imagine. Because within days, my son would begin telling me that the meeting I had just documented had not happened the way I remembered it at all. Nathan waited until we were almost home before he stopped pretending he wasn't angry. For the first 10 minutes after we left Patricia Monroe's office, he drove without saying a word. Both hands stayed fixed on the steering wheel. His jaw was tight. I watched Richmond pass outside the passenger window and tried to steady myself. Part of me still felt embarrassed. Patricia had been professional, but there was something humiliating about sitting beside my adult son while a stranger asked whether I understood what I was being asked to sign. Another part of me felt relieved. I had said no. Nobody had pressured me past that word. Then Nathan spoke. You made me look like I was trying to steal your house. I turned toward him. I asked what the document allowed you to do. You asked it in front of her like I was hiding something. You told me it was about a family trust. It was related to estate planning. The document mentioned borrowing against my property. Because those forms contain broad language. Then why didn't you tell me? I exhaled sharply. I tried. No, you didn't. Yes, Mom, I did. When at your house. More than once. I stared at him. You told me you needed temporary authority in case I was sick. That was part of it. You never said anything about using my home for financing. I never said I planned to use it. Then why was the authority there? Nathan shook his head. This is exactly why I didn't want Robert involved before we had everything organized. I almost laughed. Because he might read it, because he'd make you afraid of language you don't understand. The insult was subtle, but I heard it. Language I don't understand. You know what I mean. I know exactly what you mean. He looked at me. Do you? That silenced me. Nathan's eyes returned to the road. A few minutes later, he said, You embarrassed me. There was something strangely childish in the sentence. You are 42 years old. What does that have to do with anything? You're talking as if I refused to eat vegetables at dinner. That's not fair. No. What wasn't fair was bringing me to a notary with a document you hadn't properly explained. I was trying to help, so you keep saying. Nathan's hands tightened around the steering wheel. When we reached my driveway, he stopped the car but didn't unlock the doors. Do you really think I would take advantage of you? I looked at my son. For one painful second, I saw him at 8 years old, standing in our kitchen with tears running down his cheeks because he'd broken George's favorite fishing rod. I remembered holding him when his first girlfriend broke his heart. I remembered sitting beside him at college graduation. Love doesn't disappear when trust begins to crack. Sometimes love is what makes the cracking unbearable. I don't know what to think, I said. Nathan looked wounded. That expression followed me into the house. I went straight to George's study and opened my notebook. I wrote everything I could remember. The wording in the document. My question about borrowing. Patricia's response. Nathan saying we had already discussed it. My refusal. Patricia refusing to notarize. I even wrote down the argument in the car. For the first time, documenting my day didn't feel ridiculous. It felt necessary. 2 days later, Nathan called. His voice was warm again. "Hey, Mom, how are you? Fine. Still mad at me? I'm not mad. You sounded pretty mad Thursday. I was concerned. About the paperwork." "Yes." He sighed. "I think this whole thing got blown out of proportion. How we stopped by Patricia's office to ask some questions. That's all." I frowned. "We had an appointment. Sort of." "What does that mean?" "She had some documents available. We discussed them. She checked my identification. That's normal. She recorded the verification." Nathan paused. Then he said, "You're making it sound much more formal than it was. It was formal enough for her to refuse to notarize." Silence. What I sat straighter. She refused to notarize the document. "Mom, there wasn't a notarization. Because I said I wasn't signing." "Exactly." "No, not exactly." I stood and walked toward George's study. Patricia specifically said she would not notarize because I didn't fully understand the document. I don't remember her saying that. I stopped walking. "You were sitting beside me. I remember us asking questions. She told you to let me answer for myself. I think you're combining parts of the conversation." A cold sensation moved through me. Combining what different things we talked about. There weren't different things. "Mom." His voice became soft, patient. The voice people use when correcting someone without wanting to embarrass them. "You're remembering it more dramatically than it happened." I opened the notebook. I wrote it down when I got home. Nathan laughed quietly. "That notebook again." "Book again, yes, that notebook. Writing something down afterward doesn't make your memory perfect. I wrote it immediately. But if you misunderstood the meeting, then you wrote down the misunderstanding." I stared at the page. For several seconds I couldn't speak. The logic was frighteningly simple. A notebook could preserve what I remembered. It couldn't prove that what I remembered was accurate. "You said the document might allow you to use the equity," I said. "I said documents sometimes include broad authority." "No." "At Patricia's office you said Elaine." Again my first name. "I never asked to borrow against your house." "That's not what I said. You're implying it." "I'm asking why the authority was there. And I've answered you. No, you haven't." Nathan was quiet. Then he said the words I would remember for the rest of my life. "Mom, that didn't happen the way you think it did." My mouth went dry. "What didn't? The meeting. What about it?" "There was no big notarization meeting where you discovered some secret clause and stopped me from getting control of your house." "I never said that. You're acting like that's what happened." "Patricia refused to notarize. There was nothing to notarize because you decided you weren't ready to proceed. That is not how it happened." "Okay." That single word was worse than an argument. "Don't say okay like that." "Like what?" "Like you're humoring me." "I'm not. You think I'm confused. I think you've been under enormous stress." There it is. What every time I disagree with you, suddenly it's grief or stress or memory. Nathan exhaled. "I'm trying to protect you." "From what?" "From making yourself terrified over things that aren't happening." I ended the call. My hands were shaking. I went into the kitchen and poured myself water. Then I returned to the notebook. Thursday. The entry was there. Clear. Detailed. I read it 3 times. I said no. Patricia refused to notarize. I knew what I remembered. Didn't I? That night I barely slept. Around 2 in the morning. I sat at the edge of my bed thinking about my doctor's appointment. Dr. Mitchell had said my screening was reassuring, but reassuring wasn't the same as impossible. What if Nathan wasn't manipulating me? What if he was watching something happen to his mother that I couldn't see? The thought terrified me. The next morning I called Emily. "Can I ask you something strange?" Of course. If I were starting to have memory problems, would I know she was quiet? Sometimes people notice changes. Sometimes they don't. That isn't very comforting. "What's going on?" I told her about the conversation with Nathan. I didn't tell it dramatically. I tried to give her only facts. When I finished, Emily said, "You remember the meeting clearly?" "Yes, and Nathan says it didn't happen. He says it didn't happen the way I remember." What does that mean? I don't know. Emily hesitated. Could both of you remember parts differently? That possibility hurt because it sounded reasonable. Maybe. Mom, I'm not saying he's right, I know. But after we hung up, I felt worse. That afternoon, I drove to the grocery store. Halfway there, I suddenly couldn't remember whether I'd locked the back door. I turned around. It was locked. The next day, I walked upstairs to get laundry and forgot why I had gone up. I stood in the hallway staring at the bedrooms. My heart began pounding. Then I saw the basket. Laundry. Of course. Something I would have laughed about 6 months earlier now frightened me. Nathan had changed the meaning of every ordinary lapse. A forgotten word became evidence. A misplaced object became evidence. Walking into a room and forgetting why became evidence. I started writing more in the notebook. Breakfast, medication, grocery store. Called Emily. Locked back door. Paid water bill. At first it made me feel safer. Then it became exhausting. I was documenting my own existence. One evening I sat at George's desk and stared at a photograph of us from our 30th anniversary. I wish you were here, I whispered. George had always been my reality check. If I forgot something, he remembered. If he forgot something, I remembered. Marriage had given us two versions of every day. Now I had only mine, and Nathan was teaching me not to trust it. I opened the notebook to the page about Patricia. I ran my finger over the sentence. I said no. Then another thought came to me. Patricia. She had been there. She wasn't family. She had no reason to protect Nathan or me. For the first time in days, I felt something like relief. I could call her. I could ask what she remembered. I picked up my phone. Then I stopped. What would I say? Hello, Patricia. My son says the meeting didn't happen the way I remember. Can you tell me whether I'm losing my mind? Humiliation washed over me. I put the phone down. Not yet. Instead, I closed the notebook and went to bed. But the next morning, there was a voicemail from Nathan. Mom, I'm sorry we argued. I love you. I just want what's best for you. Maybe we should stop talking about financial stuff for a while. It's obviously upsetting you. I listened twice. On the second time, one word stood out. Obviously. As though my emotional reaction proved his point. I deleted the message, then immediately panicked. Why had I deleted it? I should have saved it. Was that careless, forgetful? I stood in my kitchen staring at the phone. And suddenly I understood how far this had gone. I wasn't just questioning one meeting anymore. I was questioning myself every hour of every day. Whether I had locked a door, whether I had paid a bill, whether I had heard a sentence correctly, whether I had remembered an argument correctly, whether my own son had told me something, or whether I had invented it. That afternoon I opened my notebook and wrote, I remember the meeting. Then beneath it I remember asking about the house. And beneath that I remember saying no. I stared at those sentences until the words blurred. I wanted them to make me feel strong. Instead, tears rolled down my face. Because for the first time in my life, I was writing down the truth, not because I feared forgetting it. I was writing it because someone I loved had made me afraid that my truth might no longer count. And I still didn't understand why Nathan needed that to happen. I waited 4 days before calling Robert Hayes. 4 days may not sound like much, but when you have begun questioning your own memory, 4 days can feel like a month. I almost called Patricia first. Her number was still saved in my phone from the appointment. Several times I opened her contact information and stared at it. All I had to do was press one button. But every version of the conversation I imagined made me feel humiliated. Do you remember me? Did that meeting really happen? Did I really say no? Did my son really say what I remember him saying? I couldn't bring myself to ask a stranger to confirm my reality. Robert was different. He had known me for 27 years. More importantly, he had known George. So on Tuesday morning, I put my black notebook, the summary from Dr. Mitchell, several bank statements, my property tax records, and every estate document I could find into a canvas bag. Then I drove downtown. Robert's office occupied the second floor of an old brick building near Monument Avenue. George used to joke that nothing inside had changed since 1994. He wasn't entirely wrong. Same dark wood furniture, Same framed photographs, same bowl of peppermints on the receptionist's desk. Robert came into the waiting room himself. Elaine. He hugged me. Not a professional handshake, a hug. That almost broke me. You look tired, he said. I am. Come in. His hair was almost completely white now, but Robert still moved with the same deliberate calm I remembered from the first time George and I met him. He closed the office door. Then he looked at the bag I had placed beside my chair. That's either a lot of paperwork or lunch for 6. Despite everything, I laughed. Paperwork. Good. I already ate. That was Robert. He knew when humor could make someone breathe again. I took out the notebook first. I need you to tell me if I'm overreacting. His expression changed. I can tell you what I think after you tell me what's happening. So I did. I started with Nathan's questions about the mortgage, the deed, the will, the investments, then the power of attorney, the document he claimed to have emailed, the missing keys, the strange calendar appointment, Nathan entering my house, the medical screening, the title company call. Finally, I told Robert about Patricia. When I finished, he didn't immediately speak. That frightened me. Well, he leaned back. First, I want to separate 2 issues. All right. Your memory and Nathan's behavior. I nodded. Your physician evaluated you. I handed him the summary. Robert read it. This is reassuring. Nathan says I could have had a good day. Robert looked over his glasses. Nathan is a real estate broker. I almost smiled. That's what I told him. Unless he's acquired a medical degree without telling anyone, I suggest we let your physician handle medical conclusions. For the first time in weeks, I felt something inside me loosen. Robert placed the paper aside. Now let's talk about the house. He pulled my deed information through his system and reviewed the records. You remain the sole owner. No changes, none recorded. No new mortgage, no. I exhaled. Robert continued. Your existing estate documents also don't give Nathan independent authority to encumber the property, so he can't borrow against it, not as things currently stand. Then what was that document? I need to see it. I don't have it. Robert's mouth tightened. Right. He made a note. Then he turned to his computer. You said Commonwealth Title Services contacted you. Yes. Do you remember who called? I opened the notebook. Melissa Grant. Monday, 9:18 a.m. Robert glanced at the notebook. You're keeping detailed records. I started because Nathan kept saying I forgot conversations. Keep doing it. That was the first time anyone had treated my notebook as sensible, rather than evidence that I was becoming obsessive. Robert asked my permission to contact the title company. I gave it. While we waited for a response, he reviewed my property records and several pieces of correspondence. 20 minutes later, his assistant knocked and handed him a printed email. Robert read it once, then again. What? He looked at me. There was a preliminary financing-related inquiry connected to the property. My stomach dropped. Financing. It didn't result in a completed loan. Who made the inquiry? Nathan appears in the correspondence. I gripped the arms of my chair. So I wasn't imagining it. I haven't said what Nathan intended, but his name is there. Yes. And the paperwork Patricia showed me mentioned financing. Yes. And he told me I misunderstood. Robert folded his hands. Elaine, I want you to listen carefully. I looked at him. Do not sign anything Nathan gives you. I won't. Not a power of attorney, not a trust amendment, not a deed, not an authorization form. Nothing. I understand. If something needs your signature, it comes through me first. The seriousness in his voice scared me more than I wanted to admit. Robert, do you think Nathan is trying to take my house? I don't know yet. That isn't very comforting. I'd rather give you an uncomfortable truth than a comforting guess. George used to say almost exactly the same thing. My eyes burned. Robert noticed but didn't mention it. Instead, he asked, Has Nathan ever discussed becoming your guardian? I frowned. No. Conservator, no. Has anyone suggested you may no longer be capable of managing your own finances? The question landed differently from all the others. Yes. Who Nathan? Anyone else? Rebecca repeated some concerns. Emily asked me to get checked. Where did their concerns originate? I thought about it. Nathan. Robert became very still. What exactly has he been telling them? That I'm forgetting appointments, repeating myself, losing things, becoming suspicious about money. Has he documented any of that? I don't know. Robert leaned back. Elaine, I'm going to explain something and I don't want you to panic. That sentence never precedes anything pleasant. All right. There are legal processes designed to protect adults who genuinely cannot manage their own affairs. I know. In Virginia, depending on the circumstances, a court can appoint someone to make certain personal or financial decisions if incapacity is established, or a conservator for financial matters. I felt cold. You think Nathan is trying to have me declared incompetent. I did not say that. But you're thinking it. I'm considering possibilities. Robert tapped the medical summary. One person's opinion that his mother is forgetful isn't enough to simply take control of her property. Then why are you worried? Because narratives matter. I didn't understand. He continued. Imagine months of messages saying you forgot appointments, family members repeating concerns, financial incidents described as confusion, statements that you're becoming suspicious or irrational, perhaps medical appointments framed as evidence that there was already concern. But my screening was normal. Yes, which matters. He leaned forward. But if someone is deliberately building a story about cognitive decline, I want to know why. I stared at him. A story. That word changed everything. Nathan hadn't simply made comments. Maybe he had been constructing something. The keys, the calendar, the paperwork, the spare key, the doctor, the meeting with Patricia. One by one, each incident could be explained. Together they formed a picture of a 67-year-old widow who couldn't remember conversations, misplaced important items, became paranoid about her finances and accused her son of things he said never happened. My stomach turned. Robert. Yes, what happens if people believe him? He chose his words carefully. If someone genuinely believes an adult is incapable of managing property or financial affairs, they can seek legal remedies. That doesn't mean they automatically succeed. There are procedures, evidence requirements, evaluations, hearings. But it could be attempted. Yes. I looked down at my hands. For months I had thought Nathan wanted a signature, a power of attorney, maybe authority over the house. Now I saw something more frightening. What if my signature wasn't the only route? What if he could make my refusal itself look like evidence that I no longer understood what was best for me? I remembered Patricia's office. I remembered asking about borrowing against the house. I remembered saying no. Then Nathan telling me later that I had misunderstood the entire meeting. Robert, if someone wanted control over another person's finances, would it help them if everyone thought that person was losing her memory? He didn't answer immediately. Finally, he said, "It could." I felt sick. Robert stood and walked around the desk. Elaine, look at me. I did. You are sitting here with organized records. You sought independent legal advice. You had a medical screening. You refused to sign a document you didn't understand. I swallowed. Those are not irrational actions. Tears filled my eyes. I've been wondering if I'm losing my mind. I know. He made me afraid every time I forgot something ordinary. Robert's face hardened. Then we stopped letting Nathan define what ordinary means. He gave me a list of practical steps. No document signed without review. No financial passwords shared. No spare keys. Monitor credit. Keep copies of correspondence. Preserve texts and voicemails. Continue documenting significant interactions. And call Patricia, he said. I looked up. I've been afraid to. Why? Because I don't want to ask her whether I remember correctly. Don't ask her that. What should I ask? Ask for any record her office maintains regarding the appointment. My heartbeat quickened. Would she have one? She told you she documented the non-execution, didn't she? Yes. Then let her records speak for themselves. Before leaving, I stood in Robert's doorway. One more question. Of course. If Nathan really believes I'm declining, why wouldn't he be relieved by my medical results? Robert looked at me for a long moment. That he said quietly is a question I think you already know the answer to. Outside, I sat in my car without starting it. I opened the notebook. For weeks I had used it defensively, to prove where I had been, what I had paid, what I had said. That afternoon, I wrote something different. Robert confirmed preliminary financing inquiry connected to house. Nathan's name appears in correspondence. Then Robert asked whether anyone has suggested I cannot manage my finances. Then after hesitating, I wrote, maybe this is not about my memory. I underlined it. My phone rang. Emily, I answered. Mom. Yes. Her voice sounded tense. I need to show you something Nathan sent me. What a list. My hand tightened around the phone. What kind of list? Emily was silent for a moment. Then she said, a list of all the times he says you've forgotten things. I closed my eyes. The fear I'd carried into Robert's office was gone. In its place was something colder. Because Nathan hadn't merely been telling people I was forgetful. He had been keeping records too. Emily sent the screenshots while I was still sitting in my car outside Robert's office. There were 7 of them. For several seconds I couldn't make myself open the first one. My phone rested in my hand while people walked past on the sidewalk. A young couple pushed a stroller toward the parking garage. A man in a gray suit hurried across the street carrying coffee. Somewhere nearby, a truck backed up its warning signal beeping steadily. The world was moving normally. Mine had stopped. Mom, Emily said through the car speakers. I'm here. I didn't know he was keeping this. Send me everything. I did. I opened the first screenshot. At the top was a message Nathan had sent Emily almost 2 months earlier. I'm starting to document some of Mom's memory issues. Nothing dramatic yet, but I think we need a record in case it gets worse. Below it was a list. May 14th, Mom couldn't find car keys. Said someone must have moved them. My stomach tightened. That isn't what happened. I know, Emily said. He didn't even know about the keys until I called him. I kept reading. May 18th, Mom forgot electric bill, became defensive when reminded. I almost dropped the phone. The bill was paid. When I checked my bank account, it had already cleared. Emily was quiet. Nathan told me you almost missed the payment. No. I opened my notebook with trembling hands. There it was. Electric bill confirmed paid. I had even written the confirmation number. Emily, I can prove that one. I believe you. The words should have comforted me. Instead, they made me want to cry. I moved to the next screenshot. May 24. Mom forgot financial consultation we scheduled. Became upset and insisted appointment appeared in calendar by itself. That appointment did appear by itself. Could Nathan have added it? He had access to the family calendar years ago. I don't know if he still did. Emily exhaled slowly. Mom, I need to tell you something. What? When Nathan first sent these, they sounded reasonable. I know. I didn't say you were incompetent. He said he was worried. That was always how he said it. I continued. June 2. Mom accused me of entering house without permission, although she previously gave permission to use spare key. My face grew hot. He entered my house and opened George's filing cabinet. He told me he was checking insurance documents for you. I never asked him to. I know that now. Another entry. June 11. Mom becoming increasingly suspicious about financial matters. Accused me of withholding paperwork she likely misplaced. Likely misplaced. Not might have. Not could have. Likely. Nathan wasn't recording facts. He was writing conclusions. And every conclusion pointed in the same direction. Me. Confused. Suspicious. Forgetful. Difficult. I reached the next screenshot. June 19. Mom repeated same concern about house documents after I already explained them several times. I frowned. I didn't repeat myself. What was the concern? The power of attorney? Emily hesitated. I need to be honest about something else. What Nathan did something like that with me. What do you mean? He asked me twice in the same conversation whether I thought you should sell the house. I waited. The second time I said, you already asked me that. He laughed and said he forgot. My heart began pounding. So if I'd answered him twice, he could say you repeated yourself. Neither of us spoke. Suddenly, an ordinary phrase from weeks earlier came back to me. Mom, we already talked about this. How many times had Nathan said that? And how many times had I believed him? I looked at the next entry. June 27th. Mom agreed to discuss property planning later, denied understanding why title company contacted her. That isn't true, I figured. I agreed to ask questions. I never authorized him to contact a title company about financing. My anger was growing now. Not the wild anger Nathan might have used against me. Something colder, cleaner. I opened the final screenshot. And there it was. July 3, Mom denied attending meeting about house documents. Insisted notary refused to notarize after discovering financing authority. This is not what happened. Increasing concern that she is combining separate conversations into false memories. I read it twice, then a third time. Mom, I couldn't answer. Nathan had done something so calculated that for a moment I struggled to understand it. He had denied the meeting to me. Then he had written down my insistence that the meeting occurred as evidence that my memory was failing. My defense had become his proof. He planned it, I whispered. Emily didn't answer. He didn't just disagree with me. I could hear my own breathing. He created the disagreement. Then he documented me disagreeing with him. Mom. He turned the truth into a symptom. Emily began crying. I am so sorry. This isn't your fault. I believed him. You believed your brother. I asked you if you were getting lost driving. You were worried. I watched you make coffee like I was evaluating a patient. That hurt because I remembered it. But I also heard the guilt in her voice. Emily, listen to me. Nathan gave you information. You responded to the information you had. I should have asked you first. Yes. There was silence. Then I softened my voice. But you are asking now. I saved every screenshot. Then I emailed copies to myself and Robert. Old insurance office habits. Never keep important evidence in only one place. Emily, did Nathan say why he was keeping this list? He said if things got worse, we'd need examples for a doctor. Anything else? Another hesitation. Once he said we might eventually need to make decisions for you. What decisions? Finances, the house, things like that. My stomach tightened. Did he use the word guardianship number, conservatorship number, power of attorney? Yes. I closed my eyes. When? A few weeks ago. What exactly did he say? Emily took a breath. He said if you became resistant to reasonable planning, we might need stronger protections. Resistant. There was another word that could be made to mean almost anything. I wasn't refusing because I understood the risk. I was resistant. I wasn't suspicious because Nathan had contacted a title company. I was paranoid. I wasn't contradicting him because he was lying. I was confused. Language was doing half his work for him. Emily, has he sent this list to anyone else? I don't know. Rebecca, probably. A doctor, I don't think so. A lawyer, I don't know. A lender, I have no idea. That last possibility stayed with me. Robert had already found Nathan's name connected to a preliminary financing inquiry. If Nathan was telling people outside the family that I was declining, then the list wasn't simply the worried notes of a son. It could be part of something much larger. I returned to Robert's office. His receptionist looked surprised. Mrs. Owens, I need 5 more minutes. Robert came out almost immediately. When he saw my face, he didn't ask me to schedule another appointment. He took me back into his office. I handed him my phone. Read. He read every screenshot without speaking. When he finished, he placed the phone carefully on his desk. Well, I asked, this concerns me. Because this isn't neutral documentation. I felt vindicated and terrified at the same time. What do you mean a neutral record might say, Elaine couldn't locate keys? This says you couldn't find them and implied someone moved them. He's creating behavior around the event. Yes. Robert pointed to another entry. Here he doesn't simply say there was disagreement about a bill. He characterizes you as defensive. And the meeting, Robert's expression hardened. This one concerns me most. Why? Because we may be able to verify it independently. Patricia. Yes. I stared at the entry again. Mom denied attending meeting about house documents. Nathan had made one mistake. He had chosen an event with a witness. Call her, I said. Robert looked at me. You're sure? Yes. He picked up the phone and called Patricia's office. Her assistant answered. Robert identified himself and explained that he represented Elaine Owens regarding estate and property matters. He asked whether Patricia maintained a record of our appointment. I watched his face. Yes, he said. Then I understand. A pause. Yes, with Mrs. Owens' authorization. He looked at me. I nodded. After another minute, he hung up. What did she say? There is a file. My heartbeat quickened. What kind she'll need to review what she can release and in what form. But she remembers us, yes. I felt the air leave my lungs. That one word did more for me than the medical screening. Yes. The meeting existed. I hadn't invented it. I hadn't combined it with another day. I hadn't imagined Patricia. I hadn't imagined sitting beside Nathan. Robert continued. She also confirmed no notarization was completed because you declined to proceed. I covered my mouth. Tears came before I could stop them. Robert gave me a moment. I said no, I whispered. Yes. I remembered saying no, yes. And Nathan told me it never happened that way. Robert's voice was quiet. I know. I cried then. Not because I was weak, because I had spent weeks terrified that my own mind was betraying me. And suddenly, for the first time, someone outside my family had confirmed that at least one of the memories Nathan challenged was real. When I finally composed myself, Robert handed me a tissue. What happens now? We keep investigating. I want to confront him. Not yet. Why? Because right now, Nathan doesn't know what we know. I looked at him. You think he'll lie again? I think we should give him the opportunity to explain himself before we show him everything. There was something about the way Robert said it that made me understand. He didn't want Nathan warned. He wanted to hear which version Nathan chose when he believed there was no independent evidence. I looked at my phone. The screenshots were still open. A list designed to make me doubt myself. But now I saw it differently. Nathan thought he had been documenting my decline. Instead, he had documented his own changing story. Before leaving Robert's office, I added another entry to my notebook. Patricia's office confirmed the meeting occurred. Then beneath it, I did not imagine it. My hand stopped. I stared at the sentence. Then I drew one line through it. Not because it was false. Because I suddenly hated the fact that I felt obligated to defend my own sanity on paper. Underneath, I wrote something stronger. Nathan lied about the meeting. I closed the notebook. For weeks, I had been afraid of forgetting. That afternoon, I became afraid of something else. Nathan wasn't merely telling me I was forgetful. He was building a record designed to make other people believe it. And Robert and I still didn't know who else had already seen it. 3 days after Robert confirmed Patricia's office had a record of our meeting, he called me at 8:17 in the morning. I remember the exact time because by then I had become a woman who noticed timestamps. Elaine, he said, can you come to my office today? Something in his voice made me sit down. What did you find I'd rather show you? Robert. A pause. Nathan has financial problems. I closed my eyes. How bad? Bad enough that I don't want to discuss the details over the phone. I'll be there at 10. I arrived 12 minutes early. Robert had already placed a folder on the conference table. It was thicker than I expected. He closed the door behind me. Before we start, he said some of what I'm going to show you comes from public business records. Some comes from correspondence we were able to obtain after you authorized inquiries regarding activity tied to your property. Is Nathan in trouble with the law? Not that I've established. That should have relieved me. It didn't. Robert opened the folder. About 18 months ago, Nathan became involved in a residential development project through a limited liability company. I knew that much. Nathan had talked about the project constantly at first. A collection of upscale homes outside Richmond. Modern kitchens, large lots, luxury finishes. He had called it his opportunity to stop selling other people's houses and start building something of his own. George had been skeptical. Development eats money, he had said after one family dinner. Nathan had rolled his eyes. Everything eats money if you don't know what you're doing. George's expression had hardened. I changed the subject before the argument grew. That memory hurt differently now. What happened to the project, I asked. Robert slid a document toward me. Construction costs rose. 2 planned buyers backed out. There were delays. Financing became more expensive. How much did Nathan invest? That's not the biggest issue. What is he signed personal guarantees? I knew enough to understand the phrase. How much? Robert looked at me. His current exposure appears to be approximately $430,000. For a moment I thought I'd heard him wrong. 430,000, yes. I leaned back. Nathan doesn't have that kind of money. That appears to be the problem. My first reaction wasn't anger. It was maternal panic. The same instinct I had felt when Nathan was 10 and fell from a tree. Fix it. Help him. Protect him. How long does he have Elaine? What happens if he can't pay? Assets may have to be sold. There could be litigation. Depending on the agreements, creditors may pursue whatever remedies are available. His house. Potentially. His savings. Potentially. I imagined Rebecca. Their home. The life they'd built. For one dangerous second, I forgot everything Nathan had done to me. How much would he need to stabilize it? Robert stared at me. No. I only asked. And I'm answering before you finish asking. He's my son. Yes. If I could loan him, no. His firmness startled me. You're my attorney, Robert, not my father. And as your attorney, I'm reminding you that we're sitting here because your son appears to have explored authority over your mortgage-free home without fully explaining it to you. The truth cut through my panic. I looked down. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. He softened. Wanting to save your child is normal. Even when he's 42, especially then. At 42, the problems are more expensive. Despite myself, I laughed once. Then Robert pulled another document from the folder. This is where your house enters the picture. My laughter disappeared. He showed me correspondence related to a financing inquiry. The language was technical, but I understood enough. Collateral, available equity, asset support, potential guarantor. Was my house offered as collateral? Not successfully. That isn't what I asked. Robert hesitated. There were discussions indicating Nathan was exploring whether equity in your property could support financing. My hands went cold. He told me no one was borrowing against my house. No loan was completed. But he was considering it. Yes. I remembered Patricia's office. Does this mean Nathan could borrow against my house? Nathan's irritated face. It's standard language. Nobody is taking out a loan. He hadn't answered the real question. He had hidden behind what had not happened yet. Why didn't he ask me? I whispered. I think he knew your answer. I looked at Robert. No. That is exactly what you said at Patricia's office. No. A simple word. Maybe that was when everything changed for Nathan. Not when I questioned him. When I refused. Robert reached for another page. This is the part I need you to prepare yourself for. I stared at him. What could be worse? He turned the document toward me. It appeared to be a summary of communication connected to Nathan's efforts to improve his financial position. I read the first paragraph, then the second. Halfway down the page, I saw my name. Elaine Owens. I read the sentence beneath it. Expected future management of mother's financial affairs due to emerging cognitive concerns. I stopped breathing. Read the next line, Robert said quietly. I did. Nathan indicated that family members were already monitoring signs of cognitive decline and anticipated that additional financial oversight might become necessary. I looked up. He told a lender, someone involved in the financing discussions. He told strangers, I'm losing my mind. He described cognitive decline. My doctor found no evidence of that. I know. He knew that. Yes. My voice rose. He knew that, Robert. I know. I stood and walked away from the table. For weeks I had wondered whether Nathan's behavior was simply fear. A son panicking over debt. A son trying to organize his mother's finances too aggressively. A son who genuinely believed she was becoming forgetful. But this was different. He had taken a private family concern, one he himself had created, and carried it into a financial discussion. My supposed decline had value to him. It made his future control of my assets sound plausible. I turned around. Did he say he owned the house? No. Did he forge my signature? Not that we found. Did he take out a loan? No. Those answers mattered. I needed them to matter. I didn't want anger turning facts into something they weren't. So what exactly was he trying to do? Robert folded his hands. My best assessment is that Nathan was trying to position himself to gain legitimate authority through the power of attorney. That would have been the simplest route. And when I wouldn't sign, the narrative about your cognition became more useful. The room felt suddenly too small. I sat again. What could he do if people believed I couldn't manage my finances? We discussed that. Say it again. Robert hesitated. He could potentially argue that intervention was necessary. That doesn't mean a court would agree. Your medical evaluation would matter. Your functioning would matter. Independent evidence would matter. But he was preparing. I believe we need to take that possibility seriously. I thought about the list Nathan sent Emily, the missing keys, the bill, the calendar, the spare key. Each item looked harmless alone. Together they could be presented as decline. He wasn't documenting me because he was worried, I said. Robert didn't answer. He was documenting me because he needed a reason. That is one possible interpretation supported by what we're seeing. Lawyers love careful language. For once I appreciated it. I needed facts, not revenge. I looked again at the financing correspondence. How much equity is in my house? Essentially the full value less transaction costs and any other considerations. About $780,000. Yes. And Nathan owes around $430. Yes. The numbers fit too neatly. I felt sick. George had spent decades protecting that house. He made extra mortgage payments when he could. He refinanced only once when rates dropped enough to make sense. He used to joke that the best night's sleep in America came from owning the roof above your bed. Nathan had looked at that same roof and seen collateral. Robert pushed the folder toward me. There's something else. I almost laughed. Of course there is. The language Nathan used is important. What language? He didn't say he currently controlled your assets. No. He said he expected to assume management. I stared at him. Meaning he was describing something he believed would happen, or something he intended to make happen. Robert didn't respond. He didn't need to. My phone buzzed. Nathan. His name appeared on the screen. For a second, neither Robert nor I moved. Answer it, he said. I did. Hello, hey, Mom. Nathan sounded cheerful. Normal. I was thinking about stopping by later. Maybe we could have dinner. I looked at the folder. $430,000. Cognitive decline. Expected management. I have plans. Oh. A pause. Everything okay? Yes. You sound strange. I'm fine. Another pause. Then came the sentence I had heard too many times. You sure you're not forgetting something? I closed my eyes. Robert was watching me. No, Nathan, I said calmly. I'm not forgetting anything. Okay. No need to get defensive. I almost laughed. There it was. If I protested, I was defensive. If I questioned him, I was suspicious. If I remembered something he denied, I was confused. Every road led to the same conclusion. Something was wrong with Elaine. Nathan said goodbye. I placed the phone on the table. Robert waited. What now? I asked. Now we give Nathan an opportunity to explain. You mean confront him? I mean a family meeting. With Emily, yes. Rebecca, yes. And Patricia eventually. I understood the word, eventually. You don't want him to know she has records. Not yet. A strange calm settled over me. Nathan had spent months controlling the order in which people received information. He told Emily one version, Rebecca another, financial people another, me another. Now for once he wouldn't control the room. Set it up, I said. Robert nodded. I gathered my notebook and stood. Before leaving, I looked back at the folder. Robert. Yes, I need you to promise me something. If I can. When we confront him, don't exaggerate anything. He raised an eyebrow. I wasn't planning to. No accusations we can't prove. No saying he stole the house. No saying he forged something unless we know he did. Robert studied me. Why? Why? Because Nathan has spent months making me look irrational. I picked up my purse. When I finally tell the truth, I want every word of it to be something he can't explain away. Robert nodded slowly. That he said I can promise. Outside I stood beneath the Virginia sun and took a long breath. I finally understood the shape of what had been happening. Nathan's problem was $430,000. My house represented roughly $780,000 of unencumbered property, and my refusal stood between those two numbers. He couldn't make the debt disappear. He couldn't make the house his. So he had begun working on the one thing he thought he could change. Whether my no would still count. Robert scheduled the family meeting for Thursday at 2 o'clock. He called it an estate planning discussion. That was deliberate. Nathan knew Robert and I had spoken, but he didn't know how much Robert had discovered. He didn't know Emily had sent me screenshots of his list. And most importantly, he didn't know Patricia Monroe had confirmed that records from our appointment still existed. For 3 days, I lived with a strange mixture of dread and anticipation. I wanted Nathan confronted. I also dreaded watching my son lie to my face again. Thursday morning, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror longer than necessary. I chose a navy blouse George always liked and simple pearl earrings Emily had given me for Mother's Day. Then I almost laughed at myself. Why was I dressing carefully? Because somewhere along the way, Nathan had made appearance feel like evidence too. If I arrived disheveled, would that prove decline? If I became emotional, would that prove instability? If I forgot a word, would everyone notice I looked at myself in the mirror? Stop. The woman looking back at me was 67. She had wrinkles around her eyes, silver in her hair. She had buried a husband. She occasionally misplaced her glasses. None of that made her incompetent. I put my notebook in my purse and left. Emily was already at Robert's office when I arrived. She hugged me tightly. You okay? No. Me neither. At least that made me smile. Rebecca arrived 10 minutes later. She looked nervous. Elaine. Rebecca. She hugged me too, although hers was more tentative. Nathan told me this was about your estate documents. In a way. Her eyes moved toward Emily. She understood immediately that something else was happening. Nathan arrived last. He entered carrying his phone and a leather portfolio. The same portfolio that had held the power of attorney document months earlier. Sorry, he said. Traffic. Then he kissed my cheek. Hi, Mom. Hello, Nathan. If he noticed the coldness in my voice, he didn't react. Robert invited us into the conference room. I sat beside Emily. Nathan and Rebecca sat across from us. Robert took the head of the table. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Nathan smiled. So what's going on? Robert opened a folder. I'd like to clarify several matters involving Elaine's property and estate planning. Nathan leaned back. Okay. Elaine has expressed concerns about documents presented to her over the past several months. Nathan looked at me. What concerns? I said nothing. Robert continued. Let's start with the power of attorney. Nathan nodded. What about it? You prepared or obtained a document naming yourself as Elaine's agent. I found a standard form. For what purpose? Emergencies. Specifically, if Mom was hospitalized, I could help with bills, insurance, things like that. Robert's voice remained neutral. Did the document include authority regarding real property? Nathan shrugged. Probably. Standard forms usually do. Financing. I'd have to see it. You don't have a copy. Not with me. I almost laughed. Months earlier he had told me he'd emailed it. Now he didn't even have a copy. Robert made a note. Did Elaine agree to grant you authority to borrow against her home? No. The answer came quickly. Did you intend to borrow against her home? Number. Robert slid a page across the table. Then explain the preliminary financing inquiry connected to the property. Nathan looked at it. For the first time his confidence flickered. Only slightly. That was research. Research for what options? What options? Nathan sighed. I'm in real estate. I look at financing structures all the time. Using your mother's property, I wasn't using it. You contacted a title company to ask questions. Rebecca turned toward him. You told me Elaine asked you to look into putting the house into a trust. Nathan didn't miss a beat. She did. I finally spoke. No, I didn't. His eyes moved to me. Mom, we discussed it. You discussed it. That's not how I remember it. There it was. So smooth. So simple. Robert didn't intervene. He let the silence sit. Nathan continued. Mom was overwhelmed after Dad died. I was trying to help simplify things. By contacting a title company without telling me I thought I told you. You didn't. Nathan looked at Emily. This is what I've been talking about. Emily's face hardened. What exactly have you been talking about? Nathan seemed surprised by her tone. Mom, forgetting conversations. You mean the list you sent me? Rebecca turned sharply. What list? Nathan stared at Emily. That was private. You were documenting Mom's supposed memory problems. I was concerned. You wrote down things that weren't true. That isn't fair. The electric bill was paid. Nathan frowned. What you wrote that Mom forgot it. She didn't. That isn't the point. It is exactly the point. Robert raised one hand. Let's stay focused. Nathan leaned back. His composure returned. Fine. Robert took out another page. Did you tell anyone involved in your financing situation that Elaine was experiencing cognitive decline? Rebecca looked at Nathan. His face changed. Not much. But enough. I may have mentioned concerns. To whom I don't remember. The irony hung in the room. Emily noticed it too. Her eyebrows lifted. Robert didn't smile. Your business liabilities are approximately $430,000. Correct? Rebecca inhaled sharply. Nathan. He looked at her. We've talked about this. No, we have not talked about $430,000. Rebecca. Is that true? Nathan rubbed his forehead. It's exposure, not necessarily what I'll owe. How much? This isn't about us. Rebecca stared at him. It apparently is. Robert continued. Did you tell a financing contact that you expected to assume management of your mother's financial affairs because of cognitive concerns? Nathan's face reddened. It was taken out of context. What context makes that statement accurate? I was explaining family planning. Were you authorized to manage Elaine's assets? No. Had Elaine agreed that you would? No. Had a doctor diagnosed her with cognitive impairment? Nathan looked at me. No. Then why say it? Nathan's voice became defensive. Because we were worried. Me. Emily. Rebecca. Emily shook her head. Don't use me. You were worried too. Because of what you told me. I told you what I saw. You told me Mom repeated herself. She did. When Nathan hesitated. Plenty of times. Name one. Emily. This isn't a courtroom. No, it's worse. It's our mother. I reached under the table and touched her hand. Robert changed direction. Let's discuss the meeting with Patricia Monroe. Nathan became still. What about it? I watched him carefully. Robert asked, did you and Elaine attend an appointment at Ms. Monroe's office regarding property-related documents? Nathan's eyes moved toward me. We stopped by. Was an appointment scheduled? I don't remember. Did Patricia verify Elaine's identification? Probably. Were documents presented? We looked at paperwork. Did Elaine ask whether the document could allow you to borrow against her house? Nathan paused. I don't remember the exact wording. I felt my heartbeat quicken. Robert remained calm. Did Elaine refuse to sign? She decided she wasn't ready. Did Patricia refuse to notarize? Nathan smiled faintly. There was no notarization. That wasn't my question. There couldn't be a refusal to notarize something Mom wasn't signing. I stared at him. There it was. The technical escape. Nathan leaned forward. This is exactly what I've been trying to explain. Mom has turned a short conversation into some dramatic meeting where she discovered I was trying to take her house. I never said you were taking my house. You implied it. I said Patricia refused to notarize, and I'm saying that's not what happened. My throat tightened. Nathan looked at everyone. We went there to ask questions. Mom got uncomfortable. We left. That's it. No, I said. He turned toward me. Nathan. She asked whether I understood the document. I'm sure she did. I said I didn't fully understand it. Maybe. I asked whether it gave you authority connected to financing. You asked several questions. She said it could. Nathan sighed. Mom, I hated that sound. You're combining pieces of different conversations. No, I'm not. This is what I mean. He looked toward Robert. She remembers parts of things. Then later they become one event. My face burned. Stop talking about me as if I'm not here. I'm trying to explain. You're trying to explain me. Nathan softened his voice. Mom, nobody is attacking you. You have been attacking my memory for months. Because I've been worried. My medical screening was normal. That doesn't mean nothing is happening. Rebecca looked between us. Nathan, maybe you should stop. He ignored her. Mom, you've lost things. You've forgotten conversations. You've become suspicious about money. You keep that notebook because you don't trust yourself to remember. The words hit harder than I expected. My notebook. Even that had become evidence against me. I keep it because you keep changing what happened. Nathan shook his head sadly. See one word. See. As though my anger proved everything. For one horrible moment, I looked around the table. Rebecca seemed frightened. Emily looked angry but uncertain. Robert was unreadable, and Nathan was calm. So terribly calm. I suddenly understood why people believed him. I was the one with tears in my eyes. I was the one clutching a notebook. I was the 67-year-old widow insisting that everyone else had misunderstood. Nathan was simply the concerned son. Maybe this was how he had intended it to look all along. Then Robert closed the folder. Nathan, I want to make sure I understand your position. Okay. You maintain there was no formal meeting at which Elaine clearly refused to grant you financing-related authority, and Patricia Monroe refused to notarize the document. Nathan glanced at me. Yes. My chest tightened. Robert asked again. You're certain? Nathan's jaw set. That's not what happened. The room became silent. Robert looked toward the conference room door. Then he said, All right. He stood. For one terrifying second, I thought that was it. Nathan had won another argument simply by sounding more certain than I did. Then Robert walked to the door and opened it. A woman was waiting outside. Silver threaded through her dark hair. Reading glasses hung from a thin chain around her neck. Patricia Monroe stepped into the room carrying a slim file and a small recording device. Nathan's face changed instantly. Not confusion, recognition. Patricia looked at me first. Mrs. Owens. Then at Nathan. Mr. Owens. Nobody spoke. Patricia took the empty chair beside Robert. Nathan stared at the device in her hand. Robert sat down again. You've told us what you remember, he said. Then he looked at Patricia. Now I think we should hear what the independent record shows. For the first time that afternoon, Nathan had nothing to say. Nathan's face changed the moment Patricia Monroe placed the recording device on the conference table. It wasn't dramatic. He didn't jump from his chair. He didn't demand to know what she was doing there. He simply stopped moving. For months, I had watched my son control conversations by controlling definitions. There was no notarization because no document was signed. There was no refusal because I had merely decided I wasn't ready. There was no deception because no loan had actually been completed. There was no memory problem accusation because he was only concerned. Every time I reached for the truth, Nathan wrapped it in softer language until I wondered whether I had imagined the sharp edges. Now there was something on the table that didn't care how calmly he spoke. A record. Patricia opened the slim file. Robert looked at her. Ms. Monroe, could you explain what you have? Certainly. Her voice was the same as I remembered from her office. Precise, unhurried. Mrs. Owens and Mr. Owens attended an appointment at my office regarding documents that included authority affecting real property. Nathan immediately leaned forward. We stopped by to discuss documents. Patricia looked at him. Yes, you attended an appointment. I just want the wording to be accurate. So do I. Emily glanced at me. Patricia continued. Because the documents involved significant property authority. My office followed its verification procedure. Identity, willingness, and awareness were addressed before any notarization could occur. Nathan folded his arms. But there was no notarization. Correct. A flicker of satisfaction crossed his face. Then Patricia added, because Mrs. Owens declined to sign. His expression disappeared. I felt Emily's hand touch mine beneath the table. Patricia turned toward me. Mrs. Owens, as I explained at the time, the verification portion of the appointment was recorded after both parties acknowledged that it would be retained with the office file. I remembered. At the time it had seemed like one more procedural detail. Yes. Nathan shifted. Is that even necessary here? Robert answered. I think it's very necessary. This is becoming ridiculous. Rebecca spoke quietly. Then let her play it. Nathan turned toward his wife. Rebecca. No. Her voice trembled. You've told me Elaine remembered this wrong. If there's a recording, I want to hear it. For the first time, Nathan looked cornered. Patricia pressed a button. There was a faint click. Then her recorded voice filled the room. Thursday, July 3rd, 10:12 a.m. Present are Patricia Monroe, Elaine Owens and Nathan Owens. I stopped breathing. July 3rd, 10:12. The date in my notebook. The time close to what I remembered. Then my own recorded voice. Yes, I understand this verification is being recorded. I covered my mouth. It is difficult to describe what it feels like to hear your own voice return from a moment someone has spent weeks convincing you never happened. It wasn't simply proof. It was like hearing myself come back from somewhere Nathan had tried to bury me. The recording continued. Pages rustled. Patricia's voice explained that she was not acting as my attorney. Then my voice asked a question. Does this mean Nathan could borrow against my house? No hesitation. No confusion. My voice sounded exactly as I remembered feeling. Concerned. Alert. Nathan shifted in his chair. On the recording, Patricia replied, the authority described here may permit actions connected to financing or instruments affecting real property. If you need advice about the legal scope, you should consult your attorney. Then Nathan's recorded voice entered. Mom, we already discussed this. My eyes moved from the device to my son. He was staring at the table. The recording continued. I need temporary authority so I can use the equity if necessary. It doesn't mean anything happens automatically. Rebecca inhaled sharply. Nathan looked up. That sounds worse out of context. Robert held up a hand. Let it play. My recorded voice answered. Use the equity for what A pause. Then Nathan. If something comes up, repairs, planning, financing, whatever makes sense. My voice sharpened. That is not what you told me at home. Mom, you're making this complicated. I am asking what I would be signing. Patricia's recorded voice interrupted. Mr. Owens, please allow Mrs. Owens to ask her questions and make her own decision. Emily squeezed my hand harder. Then came the moment I had written down. Patricia asked Mrs. Owens, do you understand the authority this document would grant? My voice answered, not well enough to sign it. And are you comfortable proceeding today? Number one word, clear, strong, no. Nathan's recorded voice followed immediately. Mom, come on. Then mine, no. If this gives you authority to use my house for financing, then I'm not signing it, Patricia replied. Then I cannot notarize this document. The room went completely still. Nobody looked at me. Everyone looked at Nathan. His face had gone pale. Robert stopped the recording. Nathan. My son cleared his throat. I never denied that she decided not to sign. I stared at him. You said that meeting didn't happen. I said it didn't happen the way you described it. That is exactly how I described it. No, you made it sound like I was secretly trying to take your house. I said you wanted authority connected to financing. Nathan pointed toward the recorder. And you heard me say, temporary authority. Rebecca looked at him in disbelief. Temporary authority to use her equity. I was trying to solve a financial problem. The words escaped before he could stop them. Robert's eyes narrowed. What financial problem? Nathan froze. Nobody spoke. Then he shook his head. That's not what I meant. Robert looked at Patricia. Is there more? Patricia nodded. Yes. Nathan's head snapped toward her. What more? The verification record continued briefly after Mrs. Owens stepped out to take a phone call. I remembered that too. My phone had vibrated. Susan had called. I had stepped into the hallway for less than 2 minutes. Nathan sat forward. I don't consent to. You acknowledged the recording at the beginning of the verification, Patricia said calmly. I'm describing the retained office record. Robert looked at her. Please continue. Patricia pressed play. There was the sound of a door closing. Then Nathan's voice. Lower this time. She's been like this lately, Patricia asked. Like what? Suspicious. Confused about conversations. My stomach turned. The recording continued. Nathan said, her doctor is looking at some memory issues. That wasn't true. My medical screening hadn't shown anything concerning. Then came Patricia's voice. If Mrs. Owens is unable to understand the document, I cannot notarize her signature. No, she understands things. She just gets confused sometimes. I felt Emily stiffen beside me. Then Nathan asked the question that destroyed the last excuse I had been trying to preserve for him. What if a doctor confirms that? Could you notarize if there's documentation that she sometimes gets confused? Rebecca whispered. Oh my God. On the recording, Patricia answered immediately. No. Nathan said. Why? Because a medical opinion does not allow me to substitute your decision for hers. If Mrs. Owens is signing, I must be satisfied that she is willing and aware of what she is executing at that time. Nathan tried again. What if I'm her power of attorney? That would be a different legal question depending on the document and authority, and you would need legal advice. But I will not notarize Mrs. Owens' signature over an expressed refusal. Then Patricia said something I had never heard. Your mother just told me no, Mr. Owens. Silence on the recording. Then Nathan, I know. Patricia stopped playback. Nobody moved. I stared at my son. Not because I needed more evidence. Because I finally understood. He knew. He had always known. He knew I remembered the meeting. He knew I understood enough to refuse. He knew I had not imagined Patricia's warning. He knew I had said no. And after hearing that no, he had immediately started asking how it might be bypassed. My voice came out quieter than I expected. You knew. Nathan looked at me. Mom, no. I held up my hand. The same word. Only now I wasn't saying it to protect my house. I was protecting myself. You knew I remembered. His eyes moved toward Robert. This is being twisted. Emily slammed her palm against the table. Stop! Nathan stared at her. Emily, no. Stop telling us everything is being twisted. Tears were running down her face. You told me Mom denied a meeting that happened. You wrote it down as evidence that she was confused. I was worried. You weren't worried about her memory. Emily pointed toward the recorder. You were trying to figure out how her memory could help you. Rebecca stood. Her chair scraped against the floor. You told me she agreed to help you. She did initially. No. I looked directly at Rebecca. I never agreed to let Nathan borrow against my home. Rebecca's face crumpled. Nathan turned toward her. Rebecca, please. She stepped away from him. Robert remained seated. Nathan, I suggest you think carefully before saying anything else. But I had one question left, the most important one. I looked at my son. If you believed I was truly confused, why did you spend so much time trying to convince everyone else? Nathan's mouth opened. Nothing came out. I waited. For months he had always had an answer. For the keys, the bill, the appointment, the title company, the documents, the meeting, everything. Now he had none. I looked at the recorder again. For weeks I had believed it might prove I remembered correctly. It had done far more. It proved my son knew I remembered correctly too. That was the real betrayal. Nathan hadn't mistaken my refusal for confusion. He had tried to turn my refusal into confusion. I felt tears on my face, but for once I wasn't ashamed of them. Say it, I whispered. Nathan looked at me. Say why you needed everyone to think I was forgetting. His shoulders dropped. The confident real estate broker disappeared. The concerned son disappeared. What remained was a frightened 42-year-old man with $430,000 of problems and nowhere left to hide them. I didn't know what else to do, he said. And with that sentence, the lie finally broke. I didn't know what else to do. For months, Nathan had always known what to say. He had an explanation for every missing object, every financial question, every contradiction. But now, with Patricia's recording device sitting in the middle of the table, my son looked smaller than I had ever seen him. Not younger. Smaller. There is a difference. I had seen Nathan frightened before. At 11 when he broke his arm. At 17 when he wrecked George's car. At 23 when he thought he had failed an important licensing exam. Back then fear made me move toward him. This time I stayed in my chair. What does that mean? I asked. Nathan rubbed both hands over his face. The development deal went bad. We know that. You know pieces. Then tell us the rest. Rebecca was still standing several feet away from him. Nathan looked at her. Please sit down. No. Rebecca. I said no. The word hung in the room. Another no. Nathan looked at the table. The project wasn't supposed to fail. I almost laughed at the absurdity. No one plans for failure. You don't understand. Then help me understand. He took a breath. We had commitments, buyers, financing, contractors. Everything worked on paper. What changed everything? Construction costs increased. 2 buyers withdrew. 1 investor demanded his money back. A lender tightened its terms. Delays created penalties. Nathan described it like a storm that had arrived without warning. Maybe some of that was true. But Robert interrupted. You also increased your personal exposure after the project was already struggling. Nathan's jaw tightened. I was trying to save it. How? By keeping it moving. With money you didn't have. Nathan looked away. That was answer enough. Rebecca stared at him. You told me our exposure was under 100,000. It was when I told you. When months ago. And you never thought to mention it became 430,000. It isn't that simple. It sounds extremely simple. Rebecca's voice cracked. You lied. I was protecting you. She laughed bitterly. Apparently that's what you call lying to women. Nathan flinched. I should have felt satisfaction. I didn't. Watching your child exposed as a liar does not feel like winning. It feels like discovering rot inside a wall you thought was solid. I asked, when did my house become part of your plan? Nathan looked at me. It wasn't like that. When I never planned to take your house. I didn't ask that. He swallowed. After Dad died. The room became painfully quiet. I felt as though someone had struck me. How soon after Mom? How soon? A couple months. George had barely been gone. I remembered Nathan changing my kitchen faucet, checking my tires, bringing sandwiches, asking about the mortgage. I had interpreted those visits as grief bringing my son closer. Now I wondered how many times he had been calculating. Nathan seemed to read my face. It wasn't all fake. I stared at him. What? I came because I was worried about you too. Don't. I love Dad. I know. And I love you. Then don't use love to clean this up. His eyes filled with tears. For once, I didn't rescue him from them. I thought if I could get temporary access to the equity, I could stabilize everything he said. Without telling me the real reason, I was going to pay it back. How? When the project recovered? And if it didn't? He said nothing. That is the question you never asked, isn't it? Nathan looked down. I leaned forward. You were willing to gamble my house on the same project that had already put you $430,000 in danger. I wouldn't have let you lose it. How could you guarantee that I would have figured something out? You already couldn't figure something out. He flinched again. Robert stayed silent. This wasn't a legal conversation anymore. It was a mother asking her son where exactly he had decided her security was less important than his pride. Nathan whispered. I panicked. I looked at Patricia's recorder. You did more than panic. He closed his eyes. I asked the question that had been waiting inside me since the recording ended. If it was only temporary, why did you need everyone to believe I was losing my mind? Nathan's eyes opened. No answer. Why did Emily need to believe it? Silence. Why did Rebecca? Nothing. Why did people involved in your financing? His face reddened. I didn't say you were incompetent. You said cognitive decline. I said there were concerns. Concerns you created. I didn't create everything. There it was. A final attempt to leave himself one small escape. What did I forget, Nathan? The keys. One time. The appointment. I didn't make it. You can't prove that. Emily spoke. But neither can you. Nathan looked at her. She continued. You wrote your version down like it was fact. I was documenting what I saw. No, you were documenting what you needed other people to see. Nathan's voice rose. You were worried too, because you told me to be. I didn't force you. Emily recoiled as if he had slapped her. I reached for her hand. Enough. Nathan looked at me. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. But you did. Rebecca finally spoke. Do you know what he told me? I looked at her. He said you had already agreed to help. My stomach tightened. Nathan shook his head. Rebecca, no. She turned toward me. He told me you and George always intended the house to eventually help the family. George intended the house to keep me secure. I know that now. Her voice broke. Nathan said you understood the financing problem. He said you agreed in principle, but after George died, you started forgetting conversations. I looked at my son. So when I said no, you told your wife I had forgotten saying yes. Nathan stared at the floor. Rebecca continued. He told me not to pressure you because it would confuse you. I almost couldn't believe the precision of it. He had isolated each of us inside a different version. To Rebecca, I had agreed and forgotten. To Emily, I was declining and needed monitoring. To financing contacts, Nathan expected future management because of cognitive concerns. To me, nothing unusual was happening at all. I looked at Emily. What did he tell you about Rebecca? She hesitated. That she was worried about you too. Rebecca's head snapped toward Nathan. I barely spoke to Emily about Elaine. Emily nodded. He made it sound like both of us were seeing the same things independently. Nathan pressed his fingers against his temples. I was trying to keep everyone calm. No, I said. He looked at me. You were keeping everyone separate. That was the real design. Not a grand conspiracy. Not a family united against me. Nathan had made each person believe the others already agreed. It was painfully effective. Rebecca thought Emily saw decline. Emily thought Rebecca saw decline. Both thought Nathan saw decline. And I thought perhaps all three of them were seeing something I couldn't. Nathan had built consensus out of conversations that had never actually happened. How long? Emily asked. Nathan looked at her. How long were you planning to keep doing this? I don't know. Until Mom signed, I hoped she'd eventually understand. Emily laughed bitterly. She understood perfectly. That's why she wouldn't sign. Nathan stood. I can't sit here while everyone makes me into some monster. I stood too. No one has to make you anything. He looked at me. You think I wanted to destroy you? I think you wanted to save yourself. Exactly. He sounded almost relieved. Yes, I was desperate. And somewhere inside that desperation you decided my reality was negotiable. His face crumpled. Mom. You made me afraid to walk upstairs and forget why I went there. Nathan stared at me. You made me check the locks twice because I wondered if I had forgotten locking them. You made me document my medication, my bills, my phone calls. I started writing down ordinary pieces of my life because you made me afraid that every normal mistake meant my mind was disappearing. Tears were running down my face now. I didn't care. I sat alone in the house your father and I built and wondered if I could trust myself. Nathan whispered, I'm sorry. No. The word came quietly. Don't give me an apology yet. His face tightened. Why? Because right now you're sorry the recording exists. That isn't fair. Maybe not. I looked directly at him. But trust is gone, Nathan. You don't get to replace it with one sentence. He sank back into his chair. Robert finally spoke. We need to discuss immediate financial protections. Nathan looked at him. Am I being cut out of everything? I couldn't believe that was his first question. Even Rebecca stared at him. I answered, I haven't decided. Mom. But you will no longer have any authority over my property. I don't have any now. And you never will. The words hurt. I let them hurt. Nathan looked as though he wanted to argue. Instead, he nodded. Patricia quietly gathered her file. Before she stood, she looked at me. Mrs. Owens, do you need anything further from me today? I looked at the recording device. No. Then I corrected myself. Actually, yes. She waited. Thank you. Patricia gave me a small nod. You're welcome. After she left, Rebecca picked up her purse. Nathan stood. Where are you going? I don't know. Rebecca, I need to think. He reached toward her. She stepped back. That small movement seemed to wound him more than anything we had said. Emily and I watched them leave separately. Then the room became quiet. Robert closed the folder. You all right, No? He nodded. That was one reason I trusted Robert. He never told me I was fine when I wasn't. I looked at the empty chair where Nathan had been sitting. For months I had imagined the truth would feel like victory. It didn't. The truth had given me my memory back. But it had also taken something from me. The comforting belief that Nathan had simply become confused, desperate, or misguided. He had known what he was doing. Not every consequence, not every legal implication. But he knew I remembered. He knew I had said no. And he had deliberately taught the people around me to hear that no as evidence that something was wrong with me. I picked up my notebook. For once I didn't write anything. There was nothing left I needed to prove. Robert asked, "What do you want to do about Nathan's debt?" I looked at him. The mother inside me already knew how easy it would be to write a check, to save the house Nathan and Rebecca might lose, to protect my son from humiliation, to make the problem disappear. But another voice had finally become louder. My own. I don't know yet, I said. Then I thought about the recording. Your mother just told me no, Mr. Owens. I closed the notebook. Yes, I said. Actually, I do. Robert waited. I am not paying his $430,000. For the first time since George died, saying no did not make me feel guilty. It made me feel like myself. The hardest part of saying no to Nathan wasn't the moment I said it. It was the morning after. I woke at 5:42 and stared at the ceiling while every instinct I had developed over 42 years of motherhood began arguing with me. He is your son. What if he loses his house? What if his marriage collapses? What if his career is destroyed? What if you could prevent all of it with one check? By 6:30, I was sitting at the kitchen table with coffee growing cold between my hands. George's chair was empty across from me. I imagined what he would say. Not what I wanted him to say. What George would actually say. He had loved Nathan fiercely. He had also spent years warning him that confidence wasn't the same as judgment. Once after Nathan lost money on an investment in his 20s, George told me something I had hated at the time. If we rescue him from every consequence, Elaine, one day, the consequence will become too expensive for us to rescue. At the time it was $6,000. Now it was $430,000. And my house. At 9 I called Robert. I want everything changed. He didn't ask what I meant. Come in tomorrow. We spent nearly 3 hours reviewing my affairs. First came authority. Robert confirmed that Nathan currently had no valid financial power of attorney over me. But there were older estate documents naming him in future or contingent roles. I want him removed. Robert looked at me carefully. From everything. Anything that would give him authority over my finances, property, or medical decisions. What about Emily? I trust Emily. He made a note. I also want someone independent involved. Robert nodded. A professional fiduciary. Yes, the decision hurt. There was a time when I would have considered appointing a stranger insulting to my children. Now independence felt like protection. We discussed structures that would allow Emily to participate in certain decisions without placing the entire burden on her. Then we reviewed my estate plan. That was harder. Do you want to disinherit, Nathan? Robert asked. I stared at George's old fountain pen lying beside my notebook. No. Robert waited. I am angry with him. I know. I don't trust him. I know. But I don't want my will to become a weapon. Robert nodded slowly. Then what do you want it to become? A boundary. We discussed placing Nathan's eventual inheritance into a controlled trust. He could benefit from it under defined terms. But he would not receive unrestricted access in a way that could be pledged recklessly against another business venture. Most importantly, Nathan could not treat my future death as a source of present-day collateral. He won't like this, Robert said. He doesn't need to. You understand, he may interpret it as punishment. Then he'll misunderstand another document. Robert almost smiled. I did too. It felt good. Next came practical protections. I changed the locks. Not because Nathan still had the spare key he'd returned. Because I no longer knew whether copies existed. When the locksmith asked why I wanted every exterior lock rekeyed, I simply said, family circumstances. He nodded as if he had heard that answer many times. Maybe he had. I changed passwords. Banking, email, investment accounts, insurance portals. I enabled transaction alerts. Anything above a certain amount would trigger a notification. Robert helped me place additional safeguards on property-related communications. I ordered a credit report, then another monitoring service. The woman who had once thought writing down where she left her keys was excessive now had layers of protection around everything that mattered. But this time I wasn't doing it because I doubted myself. I was doing it because I finally trusted myself. Nathan called 3 times that week. I didn't answer the first 2. On the third, I did. Mom. Hello, Nathan. His voice sounded exhausted. Can we talk? We are talking. I mean in person. About what the project? No. Silence. You don't even know what I'm going to ask. Yes, I do. You think I'm asking you for $430,000, aren't you? No. I waited. I need less than that. I closed my eyes. Of course. How much? 175. The number was spoken so casually that for a moment it sounded like $175. Thousand, yes. No. Mom, listen. I listened for months. This is different. How I can secure the rest if I cover the immediate shortfall. With what asset sales, restructuring. Then do that. If I do it now, I'll take enormous losses. That is unfortunate. His voice sharpened. Unfortunate. What word would you prefer? You're my mother, and you're my son. Exactly. No, Nathan. That word does not mean what you want it to mean anymore. He went silent. I continued. Being your mother means I love you. It does not mean my house is your emergency fund. I never said it was. You tried to create authority to use it. I told you I was desperate, and I believe you. Then help me. There it was. The sentence I had been afraid of. Not because it was convincing, because part of me still wanted to say yes. I pictured Nathan as a boy standing beside me on his first day of kindergarten. He had held my hand so tightly my fingers hurt. Don't leave until I go inside, he'd whispered. I hadn't. I stood there until the door closed behind him. For decades, motherhood had meant staying, helping, catching, fixing. But Nathan wasn't 5, and this time catching him meant letting him stand on me. No, I said. He breathed heavily. You have the money. That doesn't make it yours. I would pay you back. You thought the development project would pay everyone back too. That is cruel. No. My voice remained calm. Cruel would be enjoying your failure. I don't. Sounds like you do. I have barely slept because I'm afraid of what will happen to you. Then why won't you help? Because fear is not the same thing as responsibility. Nathan said nothing. I thought about George. Then I told Nathan what his father once said. If I rescue you from every consequence, eventually, the consequence becomes too expensive to rescue. Nathan laughed bitterly. Dad never believed in me. That isn't true. He thought I was reckless. You were reckless. Thanks. He also loved you. Funny way of showing it. I felt anger rise. Do not turn your father's caution into rejection because you need another reason this isn't your fault. Silence. Then Nathan whispered, I'm going to lose everything. No. You don't know that. You may lose your project. You may lose money. You may sell your house. You may have to change your life. That sounds like everything. It isn't. What would you call it? Consequences. He hung up. I cried afterward. Not delicately. I sat at the kitchen table and cried until my chest hurt. Boundaries are often described as empowering. People rarely mention that sometimes they feel like grief. 2 months later, Nathan's development venture shut down. He sold his interest at a loss. He and Rebecca listed their house. Nathan sold a luxury SUV. Several investments were liquidated. He negotiated with creditors through an attorney. It was messy, embarrassing, expensive. But he survived. That mattered. No police came. No one dragged him away. The world didn't end because I refused to save him. Rebecca called me once during that period. I wanted you to know we're trying counseling. I'm glad. I don't know if the marriage will survive. I'm sorry. She paused. I was angry with you at first, for not giving him money, yes. I appreciated her honesty. What changed, I realized I was asking you to risk your security so I wouldn't have to lose mine. I closed my eyes. That's a difficult thing to admit. Yes. Thank you for admitting it. She cried. So did I. By autumn, my legal documents were complete. Robert handed me the final folder. Nathan had no financial authority. Emily and a professional fiduciary were designated according to the new plan. My estate structure had been updated. Nathan remained a beneficiary, but with restrictions. Robert tapped the folder. Are you comfortable with this? I thought about it. Yes. Any regrets? Ask me tomorrow. He laughed. Then his expression softened. George would be proud of you. My eyes filled immediately. You don't know that. No, Robert leaned back. But I knew George. He spent his life trying to make sure you would be secure if he died first. I looked down at the documents. He would not have wanted that security sacrificed to protect Nathan from a bad investment. I knew Robert was right. A week later, I stood outside my house while the locksmith installed the final replacement lock on the back door. When he finished, he handed me 2 new keys. Want extra copies? I looked at them in my palm. For years, 1 copy had belonged to Nathan. No, I said. 2 is enough. That evening, I placed 1 key in my purse. The other went into the blue ceramic bowl beside the front door. I smiled when I saw it there. Months earlier, a missing key had helped convince me I couldn't trust my own mind. Now a new key represented something entirely different. Control. Not over Nathan, over myself. I hadn't taken his home. I hadn't destroyed his career. I hadn't emptied his accounts. I hadn't even removed him completely from my will. I had simply stopped allowing him to treat my life as a resource he could use whenever his own choices became too expensive. For the first time, I understood that justice did not always mean taking something away from the person who hurt you. Sometimes justice was refusing to give them anything more. And sometimes the most loving thing a mother could say to her grown child was the same word Nathan had tried so hard to erase. No. 14 months after Patricia Monroe played that recording, Nathan knocked on my front door. He knocked because he no longer had a key. That detail mattered more to me than I expected. There had been a time when Nathan walked into my house without calling and told me I had given him permission. Now he stood on the porch and waited for me to decide whether to let him inside. I looked through the window beside the door. He was holding a cardboard box. Nathan looked different. Not dramatically older, but humbled in a way. Expensive clothes could no longer disguise. The tailored jackets were gone. So was the luxury SUV. He and Rebecca had sold their large house and moved into a townhouse on the other side of Richmond. They were still married, although Rebecca had told me counseling was the only reason they had made it through the year. Nathan's development company was gone. He now worked for another brokerage. He sold houses again instead of trying to build an empire. For the first time in years, he worked inside financial limits. He could not simply borrow his way around. I opened the door. Hello, Nathan. Hi, Mom. I looked at the box. What is that something I found when we moved? I stepped aside. Come in. He entered carefully. That was new too. Nathan no longer behaved as though my home was partly his because he expected to inherit it someday. We went into the kitchen. Coffee, I asked. Sure. While I made it, Nathan placed the box on the table. Neither of us rushed to fill the silence. Our relationship had changed during those 14 months. We spoke occasionally. Birthday calls, a few dinners, Christmas at Emily's. But there were boundaries. Nathan did not have access to my bank accounts. He wasn't involved in my estate planning. He didn't know the details of my investments. He didn't have a house key. And whenever he offered financial advice, I politely changed the subject. Forgiveness had begun. Trust had not. I carried 2 mugs to the table. Nathan opened the box. On top was an old photograph of George. My breath caught. He was standing beside our first station wagon, grinning as if the dented piece of machinery were a Cadillac. "Where did you find this?" "In a storage box Dad gave me years ago." Nathan handed it to me. Beneath it were dozens more. George holding Nathan as a baby. Emily missing her 2 front teeth. The 4 of us at Virginia Beach. Christmas mornings, school plays, backyard cookouts. Ordinary life. The kind you don't realize is precious while you're living it. I picked up a photograph of George and Nathan fishing. Nathan couldn't have been more than 9. He loved that trip, I said. Nathan stared at it. I complained the whole time. You complained because it rained. I told him fishing was stupid. I smiled. He told me later you caught the biggest fish. Nathan laughed quietly. He let me think I did. For a while we simply looked through photographs. It was the closest we had felt in a long time. Then Nathan put one down. "Mom." I knew from his voice that we had reached the real reason for his visit. "Yes, I owe you an apology. You've apologized before." "I know." He stared into his coffee. "But most of those apologies were about what happened." I waited. "I said I was sorry you were hurt, sorry I panicked, sorry things got out of control. Yes, I never said the part I needed to say." My chest tightened. Nathan looked at me. "I knew you remembered." The room became very still. He continued. "I knew you remembered that meeting with Patricia, even after 14 months hearing him admit it hurt." "I know." "No." He shook his head. "I need to say this without explaining it away." I said nothing. Nathan's eyes filled. "I knew you remembered. I just needed everyone else to believe you didn't." There it was. No qualification, no but, no desperate circumstances, no misunderstanding, just the truth. I felt tears gathering in my eyes. "Why are you telling me now?" "Because my counselor asked me a question." What question? He asked what I would have done if there hadn't been a recording. I stopped breathing for a moment. Nathan looked ashamed. I couldn't answer. I already knew the answer. But I needed him to say it. "What would you have done?" I think I would have kept denying it. The honesty was brutal. Until when I don't know. Until I signed maybe. Until Emily believed I couldn't manage my finances. Nathan closed his eyes. "Maybe. Until you got control." His voice broke. "Yes." I looked away. Outside the kitchen window, the hydrangeas moved gently in the afternoon breeze. George and I had planted them together. For months after Nathan's betrayal, I had imagined that a full confession would heal something. It didn't. Truth does not erase damage, but it gives damage a name. And sometimes that is where healing begins. Nathan said, "I'm ashamed." "You should be." He nodded. "I know. I loved you through all of it." His face crumpled. "That was part of what made it so easy." I frowned. "What I knew you would keep trying to believe the best about me." That sentence hurt almost as much as the first. Nathan wiped his eyes. "I used that." "Yes. I don't expect you to trust me again." "Good." He looked surprised. I reached across the table. "Nathan, I hope I trust you again someday." He looked at my hand but didn't touch it yet. "But trust isn't a gift I give you because you're sorry. I understand. It comes back one honest choice at a time." He nodded. "And forgiveness does not mean access." "I know. You will not get a key because this conversation went well." A faint, sad smile appeared. "I figured. You will not manage my money." "I know. You will not be added back to anything Robert and I changed." "I understand. And if you ever tell me again that I don't remember something simply because the truth is inconvenient for you, this relationship will change permanently." Nathan finally placed his hand over mine. "I understand." For the first time, I believed that he might. Not because his apology was beautiful, because he didn't ask for anything after giving it. No money, no changes to the trust, no key, no reassurance about his inheritance. He simply stayed. Before leaving, Nathan carried the box into George's study. He paused in the doorway. I haven't been in here since... I know. He looked toward the filing cabinet he had once searched without permission. I'm sorry about that too. I know. He set the box down. Then he left. After the door closed, I stood in the hallway, listening to the lock click into place. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt peaceful. A week later, I made an appointment with Patricia. When I entered her office, she recognized me immediately. Mrs. Owens. Elaine. She smiled. Elaine. I sat across from her. I came to thank you. For what? For believing me. Patricia tilted her head. I believed what you told me about your willingness to sign. That sounds simple. It should be. But it wasn't. I told her how long Nathan had spent convincing me that I remembered the meeting incorrectly. I told her about the list, the financing problem, the family meeting. She listened quietly. Finally, I said, that recording saved me. Patricia shook her head. No. I looked at her. I didn't save you, Elaine. She folded her hands. You saved yourself when you asked questions. I felt my throat tighten. All I did was make sure your own voice couldn't be erased. I thought about that sentence all the way home. That evening, I carried my black notebook onto the porch. The blue ceramic bowl sat inside beside the door. My keys were exactly where I had left them. I smiled. For months, the notebook had been my shield. I had written down medications, phone calls, bills, appointments, conversations, proof that I was functioning, proof that I remembered, proof that Elaine Owens could still be trusted. I opened to a blank page. For a moment, my pen hovered. Then I wrote, Beautiful evening, 72 degrees. Emily called after dinner. Nathan brought Dad's photographs last week. Hydrangeas are blooming. I stopped. No evidence, no defense, just memories, things I wanted to keep. I looked around the porch George and I had repaired together so many years earlier. For a long time, I thought Nathan had been trying to take my house. Maybe in desperation, he eventually would have risked it. But I finally understood that the house was never the most valuable thing I almost lost. It wasn't the $780,000 property. It wasn't my investments. It wasn't my inheritance plan. It was my confidence in my own mind, my right to say I remember, my right to ask questions, my right to say no without having that no turned into evidence against me. Age had changed me. Grief had changed me. Betrayal had certainly changed me. But none of those things erased my voice. I closed the notebook and watched the evening light settle across the yard. Somewhere in the distance, a lawnmower stopped. A dog barked. A neighbor called good night. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary life. And for the first time in a very long while, I wasn't trying to prove that I remembered it correctly. I was simply living it.